Chapter 12:15. Yi Xian glanced at the crazed woman in front of him and muttered inwardly, "Is there a need to be so angry?" The woman glared at Yi Xian, her eyes ferocious as if she wanted to devour him whole. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. "Let's not talk about this. What do you think of the conditions I mentioned earlier?" The woman slowly closed her eyes. "Let me recover my strength first." Yi Xian smiled. "I'll be the first person you'll fight when you recover your strength, right?" The woman looked at Yi Xian. "How can I help you fight if I can't recover my strength?" Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Give me a strand of your soul." The woman narrowed her eyes. Yi Xian turned to leave. The woman in front of him was definitely not a good person. Otherwise she wouldn't have been sealed here by Moon Yanyan for so many years. He naturally didn't think that he could conquer such a woman with his charm, nor did he think that she would fall head over heels in love with him after a night with him. Yi Xian wasn't that naive. Ever since he came into contact with Moon Yanyan, he didn't dare to look down on women at all. At this moment the woman behind him suddenly said, "I agree to your conditions." Yi Xian stopped and looked at the woman behind him. The woman opened her palm and a strand of soul appeared in her palm. Soon the strand of soul floated in front of Yi Xian. She knew that if she didn't follow the man in front of her, that woman would never let her off. That woman had wanted to kill her just now. Yi Xian put away the strand of soul and said, "Let's go." The woman frowned. "Help me recover my strength." Yi Xian spread his hands. "I can't do that. But I can take you to find Yan Yan." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You can do it." Yi Xian waved his right hand and a sword landed in front of the woman. "Come on up." With that he walked up to the sword. The woman didn't go up. Yi Xian turned to look at the woman. "How about I carry you to find her?" The woman didn't hesitate any longer and directly walked onto the sword. Yi Xian pointed with his finger and the sword soared into the sky. Caught off guard, the woman almost fell down. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and hurriedly hugged Yi Xian. But just as she hugged him, she was about to let go, but she still didn't let go. If he let go, wouldn't he fall? The woman looked at Yi Xian. "You did it on purpose." Yi Xian sternly said, "Miss, please don't think of others as such filthy things. Go ask around in the fifth dimension and see what kind of person I, Yi Xian, am." The woman said mockingly, "Does a shameless and lowly person like you still need to inquire about it?" Yi Xian was speechless. The woman suddenly said, "That Tendo is called Moon Yanyan?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Are you interested in her?" The woman didn't say anything. Yi Xian said, "How about this? You ask me a question and I'll ask you a question." The woman glanced at Yi Xian. "Sure." Yi Xian nodded. "How should I address you, miss?" The woman said indifferently, "Qianemo." "Qianemo." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Miss Qianemo, ask away." The woman looked at Yi Xian. "What's your relationship with that Moon Yanyan?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Friend, good friend." Qianemo was silent. Yi Xian asked again, "Miss Qianemo, where are you from?" Qianemo said indifferently, "Dao world." "Dao world." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Ask away." Qianemo was expressionless. "What bloodline power do you have?" This was what she was most curious about because it could suppress her bloodline. It was very, very rare. Moreover, after dual cultivating with Yi Xian, she found that her bloodline showed signs of breaking through. If she dual cultivated with him a few more times. Thinking of this, she lowered her head slightly. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Crazy demon bloodline." Qianemo frowned slightly. "Never heard of it." Yi Xian said seriously, "Miss Qianemo, I have something to tell you. Don't be angry, is that all right?" Qianemo looked at Yi Xian and said, "What do you want to say?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "When I dual cultivated with you just now, I found that a lot of energy was lost." Hearing this, Qianmo's expression turned ugly. Yi Xian quickly said, "I don't mean anything else. I just want to discuss. I'm a person who has already broken away from vulgar interests. I don't have any evil thoughts in my heart. Really, I swear on my character." Qianemo fell silent for a moment and said, "That's because our minds weren't clear at that time, and we didn't properly absorb the energy produced by the fusion of our bloodlines. As a result, a lot of the energy leaked along with your essence." Yi Xian asked, "How much did we waste?" Qianemo thought for a moment and said, "At least 60%. 60%. Yi Xian was stunned and then he shook his head and sighed. "What a waste." Qianemo fell silent. Actually, her bloodline was already showing signs of breaking through. If she absorbed all the energy earlier, it wouldn't be able to break through, but it would definitely change the shackles of her bloodline and improve further. If they did it a few more times, then they might even be able to use Yi Xian's crazy demon bloodline to break through completely. If that really happened, then she would be the first in the history of her family. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Qianemo, why would our bloodlines be strengthened when we dual cultivate? Qianemo said indifferently, bloodline complements. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. Qianemo glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Qianemo, do you know about the Imperial clans and the Demon Dao clans? Qianemo said indifferently, who doesn't know about them in the Dao world? Yi Xian asked, how does your family compare to them in the Dao world? Qianemo was expressionless and didn't say anything. Just as Yi Xian was about to ask, Qianemo suddenly said, they're gone. They disappeared from the Dao world many years ago. Yi Xian was stunned and then he said, then why did Miss Qianemo come to the fifth dimension? Qianemo said coldly, what does it have to do with you? Yi Xian said with a smile, if I'm not wrong, Miss Qianemo came to escape. If your family loses power, it will definitely not be safe in the Dao world. If you escape, you might have a chance to revive your family, right? Qianemo sneered, keep guessing. Yi Xian said, do you want to fight your way back to the Dao world? Qianemo frowned slightly. Are you making fun of me? Yi Xian shook his head. Miss Qianemo, you might not know, but the Dao world is my enemy now. Qianemo stared at Yi Xian. What did you do? Yi Xian said with a smile. Rumor has it that the Dao world has a mysterious book called the Dao Scripture. That thing is in my hands. Impossible. Qianmo's voice suddenly became louder. How could that mysterious book be in your hands? Yi Xian, did you dual cultivate too much? Is there something wrong with your brain? Yi Xian was speechless. Qianemo snorted coldly and didn't say anything. She seemed to realize that her words were inappropriate. Yi Xian said, do you know Yi Qingji? Qianemo said in a deep voice, don't tell me that he escaped here. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. He escaped here with a bookstore and now that bookstore is in my hands. Qianemo stared at Yi Xian. If what you said is true, I'm very curious. Why aren't you dead yet? Yi Xian pointed at the starry sky. Qianemo frowned slightly. What do you mean? Yi Xian said, there are people up there. Qianemo was speechless. Yi Xian continued, Miss Qianemo, I think you can use me. You can use my power to fight your way to the Dao world and revive your clan. Qianemo sneered and didn't say anything. Yi Xian said with a smile, do you think the fifth dimension Tendo is considered a top-notch expert in the Dao world? Qianemo was silent. That woman was definitely a super expert in the Dao world. If it was a one-on-one fight, no one would be her match. Yi Xian said with a smile, to tell you the truth, it was her idea to attack the Dao world. She wants to conquer the Dao world. Qianmo's eyelids twitched. If it was only Yi Xian, then he would absolutely not have the ability to go against the Dao world. But if that abnormal fifth dimension Tendo was included, then there was still a chance. After a long time passed, Qianemo said in a low voice, what do you want me to do? Yi Xian said seriously, it's very simple. Miss Qianemo is at the self-release realm. If we fight in the future, you just have to help me resist a self-release realm expert. Of course, if you have any other experts in your family, you can call them over as well. We can join forces and work together. Qianemo suddenly said, is that book really in your hands? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Qianemo hesitated for a moment and said, can you let me have a look? Yi Xian said seriously, no. Qianemo glanced at Yi Xian and didn't say anything because she'd expected this. How could this man possibly let her see such a divine object? Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, I'll only let my own people see it. Own people. Qianemo stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You slept with me. Yi Xian hurriedly said, Miss Qianemo, I was forced. Qianemo sneered. You slept with me, that's an unchangeable fact. Yi Xian fell silent. Qianemo said coldly, what? Nothing to say? Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Qianemo, to tell you the truth, I'm still unable to open that book because Yi Qingji set up a restriction when he left it behind. I'm not strong enough to open it. As soon as he finished speaking, he took out the book and passed it to Qianemo. Qianemo didn't refuse. She took the book and her expression gradually became extremely serious. In the beginning she didn't really believe Xian's words. But now she did. This book wasn't simple at all. Even though her strength had been sealed, she still had her knowledge. Qianmo looked at Xian. How did you get this book? Xian said, the prophet gave it to me. Qianmo frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? How could he give this to you? Xian said, he's dead. Qianmo looked at Xian. You killed him? Xian shook his head. It's someone else. Anyway, the book is in my hands now. As he said that, he turned to look at Qianmo. The moment he turned around, the two of them had a very intimate contact. Qianmo frowned. What are you doing? She wanted to retreat, but there was no way out. She didn't have any cultivation now. Xian said seriously, Miss Qianmo, as I said before, you have two choices. One is to take revenge on me and Tendo, and the other is to stand on our side. Qianmo looked at Xian. If you want to talk, just talk. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Xian was speechless. P.S. Vote. Is there anyone voting? Chapter 12:16. Xian felt slightly awkward. There were some places that he could not control. Qianmo looked at Xian and did not speak. The atmosphere suddenly became slightly awkward. That was because a certain part of Xian was abnormally firm. Qianmo's face suddenly turned red. The effect of the blue pill in her body had not completely disappeared. After all, her cultivation was sealed and her resistance had decreased. Thus, when a certain part of Xian's body was pressed against her, she could not help herself. Xian suddenly turned around and took a deep breath. His blood was also boiling. What's going on? Could it be that I'm addicted? Xian shook his head and suppressed the heat in his heart. One cannot be too beastly. The two of them did not speak along the way. Not long later, Xian brought Qianmo to the pawn shop. The fifth dimension Tendo was in the pawn shop and Xiaoyu was there as well. Qianmo glanced at the Tendo with a trace of fear in her eyes. Although she was at the self-release realm, she felt as weak as a chicken in front of this Tendo. She was really curious about the extent of the fifth dimension's heavenly Tao. Moon Yanyan glanced at Qianmo, then looked at Xian. You better think it through. Xian nodded. Miss Qianmo has already agreed to cooperate with me. Moon Yanyan gave Xian a thumbs up. You're really something. After she finished speaking, she pointed at Qianmo with her finger. In an instant, the seal on Qianmo's body disappeared. Qianmo glanced at Moon Yanyan and did not speak. Moon Yanyan looked at Xian. How do you feel after dual cultivating? Xian hesitated for a moment and said, the power of my bloodline has changed, but it is not that obvious. Moon Yanyan looked at Qianmo and smiled. Then your bloodline should have had a huge breakthrough, right? Qianmo did not say anything. Xian was puzzled. Why? Moon Yanyan smiled. Because your bloodline is stronger than hers. When you dual cultivate, she is the one who takes, so she benefits more than you. Xian blinked and then he said, then wouldn't I suffer a huge loss? Qianmo glanced at Xian coldly. Her gaze could kill. Moon Yanyan laughed and said, it's a bit of a loss. It should be said that the two of you are at a disadvantage because when the two of you dual cultivated, you were messing around and didn't absorb all the energy after the dual cultivation. Otherwise, the benefits you obtained would be far more than this. Xian nodded. Understood. At this time, Moon Yanyan suddenly pointed his finger, and two white lights entered the space between Qianmo and Xian's eyebrows. Xian was a little stunned. This is. Moon Yanyan smiled. An ancient dual cultivation secret technique from a very long time ago. I think it's suitable for the two of you. Qianmo's expression immediately turned cold. She wanted to say something, but Moon Yanyan suddenly looked at her. Don't act like you've gained something. If it wasn't for me, it would be a fool's dream for your bloodline to have a breakthrough. Qianmo looked at Moon Yanyan and didn't say anything. Moon Yanyan suddenly looked at Xiaoyu. Stay here for this period of time. No one will come looking for trouble with you. I'm going out for a while. Xiaoyu hurriedly asked, where are you going? Moon Yanyan smiled. I'm just going to stroll around. After she finished speaking, she looked at Xian. Help me take good care of her. Xian hesitated for a moment and then he asked, where are you going? Moon Yanyan shrugged. I'm going to stroll around and do something on the way. Do something. Xian's expression was a little strange. His intuition told him that this woman must be up to something bad again. Moon Yanyan left as soon as he said he would, without the slightest hesitation. In the pawnshop only Yi Xian and the other two were left. Yi Xian looked at Xiao Yu and smiled. Xiao Yu, are you going to stay here or play in my pagoda? There are many spirits in the pagoda. Xiao Yu blinked. Many spirits? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Xiao Yu said, then I'll go to the pagoda. Yi Xian smiled. Okay. After he finished speaking, he directly brought Xiao Yu to the pagoda. With Big Sister and the others in the pagoda, Xiao Yu would have company inside so it wouldn't be too boring. Yi Xian turned around and looked at Qian Mo, who was expressionless. I'll stay here. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left in the pawnshop, Qian Mo slowly closed her eyes. She was unwilling. She was indeed unwilling. After being sealed by the Tendo for so many years, who would be willing? But there was no other way. That woman was so strong that it made her despair. She was already at self-release and thought that she would be able to fight against that woman, but she didn't expect that she would still be instantly killed. Thinking of this, Qian Mo couldn't help but want to curse. When did a Tendo become so abnormal? As if she thought of something, she suddenly looked in the direction that Yi Xian left in. The study room. Qian Mo's eyes gradually turned cold, but very quickly, the coldness in her eyes turned into helplessness. As soon as Yi Xian returned to the Wu clan, Guan Yin found him. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Elderly has already built that array and wants you to try it. 5th dimension array. Yi Xian was slightly surprised. So fast. Guan Yin shook his head. There are still many problems that need to be solved. Now I want you to try it and see what problems will arise. Yi Xian's face darkened. I want me to try it, but what if I fail this step? Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. Only you can resist the might of the array. Yi Xian nodded. Take me there. Guan Yin nodded and then he brought Yi Xian to a starry sky. At this moment, there were already thousands of people gathered in this starry sky, and all of them were array masters and spirit array masters. The person in the lead was elderly. When they saw Yi Xian, everyone present hurriedly bowed slightly. These people were very respectful towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at them and then he cupped his fists. Everyone, you've worked hard. Everyone hurriedly shook their heads. To them this was a battle for survival. Of course, there was another meaning to all of them who were array masters. Just the thought of constructing an unprecedented and extraordinary array was enough to make their blood boil. Yi Xian gazed at elderly and the latter turned around, set out. As soon as he finished speaking, the starry sky in an area of almost 50,000 kilometers suddenly trembled violently. In next to no time, the starlight in the surroundings instantly became illusory, and it didn't take long for an enormous starlight formation to appear beneath their feet. The starlight formation was like a disk that covered the entire starry sky. There were countless tiny golden talismans on the starlight formation, and they covered the starry sky. At this moment the entire starry sky had become extremely strange. Elderly pointed at a golden disk in the distance. That's the core of the formation. Yi Xian nodded and then he directly appeared on the golden disk. Bang! In an instant the entire starry sky trembled violently. The starlight formation beneath Yi Xian's feet trembled, and the golden talismans started to revolve swiftly. In an instant, countless strands of energy surged out from within the talismans, and then they converged like a river towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression changed when he came into contact with this energy. What formidable energy! At this moment Yi Xian's entire body trembled violently. This energy was external and didn't belong to him, so it was a huge blow to his body. Meanwhile, elderly hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, this energy doesn't belong to you. You have to take control of it and utilize it." Actually, he was most worried that Yi Xian's body wouldn't be able to endure this formidable energy. If that happened, then Yi Xian would be the first to die. But if Yi Xian was able to endure this energy, then Yi Xian would be able to utilize the formation to control this energy and even control it. But the precondition was that Yi Xian was able to endure it. Yi Xian's eyes slowly closed as he stood within the core of the formation. At this moment his body was slightly inflated. The energy was very, very strong. But fortunately, it wasn't strong to the point that he couldn't endure it. Yi Xian clenched his fist slowly. At this moment he felt that his body was filled with a formidable energy that could destroy the world. It wasn't his energy, but it was very strong. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly shouted angrily, "Come!" As soon as he finished speaking, a sea of stars suddenly appeared in his eyes. In next to no time, the energy of countless stars in the entire starry sky converged towards him. The star Dao Law. His face instantly turned pale when the energy of the stars entered his body. Elder Li's expression changed drastically from afar, and he hurriedly said, "Young Master Yi, stop quickly. Your body can't absorb too much energy right now." The formation masters present were burning with anxiety as well, because it was obvious that Yi Xian had absorbed too much energy, and his body couldn't endure it anymore. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this moment he felt like his body was slightly numb. Obviously his body wouldn't be able to endure it for much longer. Right at this moment, the depths of the starry sky in the distance suddenly split open, and then two old men walked out from within it. When they appeared in this expanse of the starry sky in the surroundings trembled violently as if it couldn't endure their strength. It was an extremely shocking sight. The self-release realm. Everyone in the surroundings gazed at the two old men. Where did they come from? The two old men glanced at the surroundings and then they gazed at Yi Xian's group. Both of them frowned when they saw the formidable energy that descended from above, and then they exchanged glances with each other with bewilderment in their eyes. Did these fellows know that we were coming? They'd been sent by the sect master and the immortal pavilion. They were the red-clothed sect master of the God King Palace, Li Mian, and the young pavilion master of the immortal pavilion, Mo Dao. Both of them were at the self-release realm. Their objective for coming here was very simple, and it was to find out if the scripture was in Yi Xian's possession. The two of them hadn't expected to encounter such a force as soon as they descended. Did the people of the fifth dimension know that they were coming? Below, Yi Xian looked at the two old men. He could sense that they were both at the self-release realm. Clearly, they were from the Dao world, or perhaps they were from that ancient temple. Li Mian looked at Yi Xian. "You're Yi Xian?" Yi Xian looked at Li Mian. "From the Dao world." Li Mian nodded. He looked at Yi Xian. "Do you have the scripture?" Yi Xian grinned. "You came at the right time." As soon as he finished speaking, the executing heaven sword suddenly appeared in his hand. In the next moment he slashed towards the depths of the starry sky. Boom! In an instant, the power he'd gathered in his body burst forth like a dam, transforming into a ray of sword light that slashed towards the depths of the starry sky. This sword caused the world to lose color. Chapter 12:17. This attack could be said to be Yi Xian's strongest attack up until now. A single slash could obliterate the world. When Li Mian and Mo Tian witnessed this attack, their expressions instantly changed. Danger. That was what they felt at this moment. They didn't dare act carelessly. Li Mian took a step forward and slowly clenched his right fist. In an instant the space around him transformed into a huge vortex, and a powerful force surged out incessantly from within the vortex. In the next moment he smashed his fist downwards. In an instant the space where his fist struck was instantly obliterated, and then a black fist swept down along with the vortex. At the instant that Li Mian attacked, Mo Dao suddenly took a step forward. As soon as this step descended, the entire starry sky trembled violently. After that he slapped his palm forward, and an enormous palm that was over 3 kilometers long swept down from the starry sky. As soon as this palm appeared, the entire starry sky became illusory. It was the full force attack of two self-release realm experts. Obviously they hadn't underestimated Yi Xian's attack. After living to this point in their lives, they were very clearly aware that they couldn't underestimate anyone. Especially Yi Xian, because he was related to Yi Qingji. In the starry sky, Yi Xian's attack slashed directly against the fist. Bang! The fist trembled violently before exploding apart, and a powerful wave of energy shook the starry sky. It was like a huge explosion had occurred, causing the starry sky to tremble. The sword energy hadn't dispersed, and it continued forward and slashed towards the enormous palm. Everyone watched as the sword energy struck the palm. The palm trembled violently and then it became illusory. After a moment of silence, the palm transformed into nothingness. The sword energy hadn't dispersed, and it continued forward and slashed towards Li Mian and Mo Tian. Li Mian and Mo Tian's expressions instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. The strength of this attack had slightly exceeded their expectations. They exchanged glances and then they suddenly became illusory. In the blink of an eye, two powerful forces capable of obliterating the heavens and the earth swept down from the starry sky. They were going head-on against each other. In next to no time, the two forces smashed against Yi Xian's sword energy. Boom! An expanse of sword light shattered and countless strands of sword energy swept through the starry sky. At this moment the starry sky was shattered by the remnant strands of sword energy, and Li Mian and Mo Dao were pushed back nearly 100,000 feet. When they stopped, their bodies were covered in sword wounds and their bodies were in pieces. Seeing this scene, both of them were slightly stunned. In that instant the two of them had almost been killed by that sword chi. Down below, Yi Xian held his sword and looked at Li Mian and the other man. Li Mian and the other man gave Yi Xian a deep look before turning around and leaving. The two of them did not choose to continue fighting because they were not confident that they could withstand a second strike from Yi Xian. Down below, Yi Xian didn't attack again because if that kind of expert wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and looked at Old Man Li and the others not far away. The power of the formation isn't enough. Continue to strengthen it. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a streak of sword light and vanished into the distance. Not enough power. Old Man Li and the others glanced at each other. Almost killing two self-release realm experts isn't enough? Meanwhile, Guan Yin suddenly said, the Dao world doesn't just have two self-release realm experts. Besides that, we still have the fifth dimension tribulation to face. As she spoke, she glanced at the others and said, continue to strengthen the formation according to what he said. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. All the formation masters exchanged glances and smiled bitterly without end. They'd thought that the formation was sufficiently terrifying, but they hadn't expected that it would still be insufficient to the extent that Yi Xian was satisfied with. It wasn't strong enough. After a short moment of silence, Old Man Li suddenly said, everyone, if you have any thoughts, then feel free to voice them. Meanwhile, a formation master spoke in a low voice. If we want to strengthen the formation, then we need manpower. We need to gather the top-rate experts of our fifth dimension here and rely on their strength. The others here frowned when they heard this. It was not difficult to gather all the strong people here. What was difficult was whether Yi Xian could withstand such a strong force if that was the case. It wasn't just Yi Xian, whether the formation would be able to endure it was a huge problem as well. It didn't take long for all the formation masters here to start discussing. Yi Xian returned to the Alliance Hall with Guan Yin by his side. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and said, this matter can't be rushed. From a certain point of view, you were able to heavily injure two self-release realm experts with a single strike of your sword. This formation has already succeeded. Yi Xian nodded. I know. However, it's far from enough. As he spoke, he looked up into the starry sky and said, our enemies aren't just the fifth dimension tribulation, there are those above the starry sky as well. Guan Yin nodded. Yes. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin and said, how has the overall strength of the fifth dimension improved recently? Guan Yin said, it's been very good. We have 28 half-step self-release realm experts now. Arrow, the one-legged woman from the Endless City, and the variant beast scripture have just broken through. It won't be long before Demon Yen and God Emperor will be at self-release realm as well. As she spoke, she paused for a moment and said, Miss Lanxiu and the Academy's Zhang Wenxiu have extremely good natural talent. However, it isn't suitable for them to charge into the half-step self-release realm right now. Our people are helping them stabilize their foundations. Once the time is ripe, it won't be difficult for them to attain self-release realm. Yi Xian nodded. Focus on fostering those with extremely good natural talent. Of course, those whose natural talent isn't that good, but so long as they work hard, we'll still foster them. Guan Yin nodded. I understand. Natural talent wasn't the only standard for success. Sometimes hard work was even more important than natural talent. At this moment, Guan Yin suddenly said, a group of people came to us in hopes that we can provide them with cultivation resources. However, I still want your confirmation. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Who? Guan Yin said, Tai Yi and the others. Tai Yi and the others. Yi Xian frowned when he heard this. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and waited for Yi Xian's reply. Yi Xian shook his head. Let them leave. Guan Yin wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian smiled and said, If we can't go through thick and thin together, how can we go through thick and thin together? Guan Yin nodded. I understand. Yi Xian said, we need to let the people of the world understand that we aren't fools. If we can go through thick and thin together, we have to go through thick and thin together as well. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian. I'll make the arrangements. Yi Xian suddenly said, how are a Mu and a Qian doing? Guan Yin said solemnly, both of them are trying to break through to the origin returning realm. Yi Xian was stunned. That fast? Guan Yin smiled and said, it's all thanks to Xiaoling. The elixirs she refined are truly heaven-defying. Xiaoling, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. That little fellow was very useful. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said, oh right. The sword set. Guan Yin said solemnly, they are the ones we focus on nurturing. All the top-notch resources will be provided to them first. They will be prioritized over everyone else. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Guan Yin said, they are the best fighters here. If they can break through, they will be the sharp sword of the 5th dimension, a sword that can pierce through the 6th dimension and the Dao realm. Yi Xian smiled and said, 6th dimension? The Dao realm? At this moment he suddenly realized that Guan Yin's ambition was not small. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian and said, you don't have this plan? Yi Xian smiled and said, forget about the 6th dimension. However, I feel that we can still do something for the Dao realm. Guan Yin said solemnly, the 6th dimension is helping us now because, Yi Xian suddenly said, no matter what, if they don't betray me Yi Xian will not betray them. Just like the 5th dimension, if you don't betray me Yi Xian will not betray you. Do you understand? Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian suddenly said, you can have ambition but you cannot be ungrateful. After saying that he turned and left. Guan Yin was silent for a moment and shook her head. She hoped that Yi Xian's ambition would be greater and more ruthless. However, she did not want Yi Xian's ambition to be too great and too ruthless. Because she was afraid. Afraid that when Yi Xian became ruthless he would even kill his own people. If that was the case, the spirit tribe would not have a good ending in the future. An unscrupulous and ambitious person would sacrifice everything, including his loved ones when necessary. However, Yi Xian was different. He would never sacrifice the people around him for any benefits. Thinking of this, Guan Yin sighed softly and said, a kind person. After saying that, she turned and left. In this kind of world, not doing evil was already a great kindness. After Yi Xian left, he came to a starry sky where a woman had been waiting for a long time. It was Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian and without any nonsense she stabbed with her sword. One sword, one thought. Seeing this, Yi Xian shook his head. What was a monster? This Xiaoqi was the real monster. He had only demonstrated the sword cognition to her and she had already learned it. This talent was like cheating. Yi Xian did not dare to be careless and he stabbed with his sword as well. Both of them used sword cognition. The moment the two swords touched, boom. Xiaoqi instantly retreated hundreds of feet. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi were stunned. Yi Xian did not expect that the power of his sword was so much stronger than Xiaoqi's. Xiaoqi was also surprised. Why is your sword so strong? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. At this moment, a voice came from the side. Because his sword Dao faith is stronger than yours. Xiaoqi and Yi Xian turned to look. Not far away, two women were walking over. It was Audiobook and Situ. Audiobook looked at Yi Xian. Your sword Dao faith is stronger than hers, so the power of your sword is above hers. Xiaoqi suddenly looked at Yi Xian. What's your sword Dao faith? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, protect the 5th dimension. Protect the 5th dimension. All of them fell silent when they heard this. Meanwhile, Audiobook suddenly said, if you're sincere, then the entire 5th dimension will be the foundation of your sword Dao faith. Your sword cognition will be based on the entire universe. Very few people can surpass you in sword cognition. Even I can't. Yi Xian looked at Audiobook. Senior sister Audiobook, what's your sword Dao faith? Audiobook spoke indifferently. It has nothing to do with you. Yi Xian was speechless. Suddenly the space before Yi Xian trembled. In next to no time he frowned and a trace of ghastly killing intent flashed through his eyes. A short moment later he suddenly said, send the order. The Dao scripture is in my hands. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. P.S. I was chatting with a reader yesterday and he actually recommended some embarrassing websites to me. Oh my god, I really have to give it to you. Do you have any misunderstandings about me? Chapter 12:18. Zhou and the rest had not expected Yi Xian to suddenly do this. Everyone was still guessing that the Tao scripture was in his hands. If he announced it, things would become very troublesome. Xiaoqi said solemnly. But what happened? Yi Xian nodded. The Tao world is starting to target Xiao Dao. As he spoke, he looked up at the starry sky. I need to attract some of their firepower. Tao world. Countless people were searching for the plain-dressed woman, but there was no news of her whereabouts or the emperor race's patriarch. Thus, some people began to target the demonic families. After all, the demonic families were at their weakest. Although the demonic families were weak, they still possessed immense wealth. This was wealth that no faction could refuse. The current situation of the demonic families was very bad. Within the demonic families, Xiao Dao and an old man sat opposite each other. The old man was the sect master of the Bloodshed God Palace, second only to the sect master. The sect master looked at Xiao Dao. Miss Xiao Dao, if the demonic families are willing to submit to the Bloodshed God Palace, the old man can guarantee that the demonic families will exist forever. Very direct. Clearly, the Bloodshed God Palace wanted to devour the demonic families. Xiao Dao fell silent. The current demonic families did not have the right to refuse. They did not even have the chance to delay. If they refused, even if the Bloodshed God Palace did not openly attack the demonic families, they could still play them to death in secret. A demonic family with only one self-release realm cultivator was truly weak. At this moment, Xiao Dao suddenly felt a sense of helplessness. The demonic families had really played themselves to death this time. Why did they provoke the plain-dressed woman for no reason? The head sect master was just about to speak when she suddenly frowned. It didn't take long for her to stand up, turn around and vanish into the horizon. Seeing this, Xiao Dao and Immerse were stunned. Xiao Dao looked at Immerse. What happened? Immerse shook his head. I don't know. I'll go investigate. With that, he turned and left. Moments later, Immerse returned to the hall and said in a deep voice, There's news from the lower realm that the scripture is in the young master's hands. Xiao Dao frowned. Who did it? Devil Ancestor said, News from the fifth dimension. Now this news has spread throughout the Tao world. Xiao Dao fell silent for a moment, and then she walked to the entrance of the hall. She looked towards the horizon and said softly, It's him. Immerse was puzzled. What do you mean? Xiao Dao said solemnly, He must have known about our situation, so he released the news to attract our firepower. Immerse frowned. How could he know about our situation? Xiao Dao looked at Immerse. 6 dimensions. Upon hearing this, Immerse understood. The sixth dimensional gang's Yi Xian was no longer a secret. Immerse said in a deep voice, Son-in-law did this. Then he looked at Xiao Dao. I can see that the young master cares about the young lady a lot. The young lady did not misjudge him. Xiao Dao was speechless. Immerse said again, But if he does this, he will become dangerous. Xiao Dao nodded. Very dangerous. Now the eyes of the entire Tao world will fall on him. Then there was a trace of complexity in her eyes. He really is a fool. The Tao scripture was in the fifth dimension. This news quickly spread throughout the Tao world like a plague. At this moment, those who were looking for the plain-dressed woman started to change their target. The fifth dimension. But soon they had a headache because they could not go down. Not everyone could go down to the fifth dimension. Above the clouds, the Pope and the pavilion master of the celestial pavilion, Jiangyu. In front of them were Li Mian and Mo Dao, who had just come up from the fifth dimension. The Pope said softly, He knows that you too want to go down? Li Mian said in a deep voice, Yes. As soon as we reached the fifth dimension, Yi Xian was waiting for us there. Then he used an array to injure us. The Pope asked, Do you know what array it is? Li Mian shook his head. I don't know. The Pope nodded. As expected of Yi Qingji, the most outstanding person in the Tao world, Jiangyu suddenly said, He knows that you too want to go down. Could it be the sixth dimension's doing? The sixth dimension. In fact, they also knew that the sixth dimension was helping Yi Xian. But regarding this matter, they did not have a good solution. They could not declare war on the sixth dimension, right? The sixth dimension was not as easy to bully as the fifth dimension. At this moment, the Pope suddenly said, Whether it is the sixth dimension or not from this matter, it can be seen that Yi Xian is already on guard against our Tao world. In other words, the Tao scripture is most likely on him, and that plain-dressed woman only read the Tao scripture. Jiang Yu nodded. That is reasonable. But I am a bit worried about that plain-dressed woman and Di Lin Yuan. If that plain-dressed woman is still alive, who knows to what extent she will grow after reading the Tao scripture. If Di Lin Yuan is still alive, it proves that plain-dressed woman has already fallen. Then Di Lin Yuan will definitely obtain the secret of the Tao scripture from her. The Pope suddenly said, so we must quickly obtain the Tao scripture from Yi Xian to prevent it from falling into the hands of the sixth dimension. Jiang Yu slightly frowned. You want me to go down personally? It could be said that in the Tao world only self-release realm experts could go to the fifth dimension. This was because passing through the barrier between two universes was extremely difficult. The Pope suddenly said, think about it. If Di Lin Yuan finds the plain-dressed woman, what will the outcome be? Jiang Yu slightly narrowed his eyes. Both sides will suffer. The Pope nodded. The plain-dressed woman is heavily injured. If Di Lin Yuan finds her, the two of them will definitely fight. With their strength, no matter who wins, the other side will definitely be heavily injured. My guess is that the plain-dressed woman or Di Lin Yuan is currently resting and healing somewhere. To the side, Li Mian suddenly said, why not give up on these two and directly find Yi Xian? Mo Dao shook his head. No matter which one of them is alive, they will be a threat to us. The Tao scripture is in Yi Xian's hands. Although Yi Xian is powerful now, his threat to us will come in the future. As for this plain-dressed woman and Di Lin Yuan, they are both at the self-release realm. Either one of them will be a threat to us. Li Mian slightly nodded. Although Yi Xian has the Tao scripture, the current Yi Xian could not threaten the Tao world. As for the plain-dressed woman and Di Lin Yuan, they were both at the self-release realm. If one of them advanced further, at this time the Pope suddenly said, we will split into two groups. Brother Jiang and I will find the plain-dressed woman and Di Lin Yuan. Our people will go to the fifth dimension. Jiang Yu solemnly said, that Yi Xian does not seem to be as weak as we think. The Pope looked at Jiang Yu. Then send more people. My God Palace will send 3 self-release realm experts. Your immortal pavilion will also send 3 self-release realm experts. Moreover, let them bring the divine item down. 6 self-release realm experts. One had to say that this lineup did not underestimate Yi Xian at all. At the side, Li Mian suddenly said, I feel that Yi Xian is not so simple. Everyone looked at Li Mian. Li Mian solemnly said, although he relied on a raise to injure us, his sword is very strong. I feel that this person is also a great threat. Why don't we directly kill him? In any case, the book house is in his hands. Not only can we get rid of future troubles, we can also obtain the book house. The Pope asked, 6 self-release realm experts are not enough? Li Mian shook his head. However, if Cult Master and Pavilion Master Zhang personally go down, then we will have 100% confidence. The Pope shook his head. I know your worries. But have you thought about what if the Tao scripture is not with Yi Xian but with that plain-dressed woman? Li Mian was silent. In truth, in the hearts of the Pope and Jiang Yu, they felt that the Tao scripture was with the plain-dressed woman and not with Yi Xian. How could a self-release realm expert let go of the Tao scripture? The two of them wanted to find the plain-dressed woman or Di Lin Yuan. Of course, the Tao scripture could also be in Yi Xian's hands. In their opinion, a 6th-dimension self-release realm expert was enough to sweep through the entire 5th dimension. It had to be known that the current 5th dimension did not even have a single self-release realm expert. At this time, Jiang Yu suddenly said, although the 5th dimension does not have any self-release realm experts, Yi Xian is not simple. Moreover, the 6th dimension is helping him. When he spoke up to here, he paused for a moment before he said, Pope, why don't we do this? Let them take your God King Palace's divine ruler and my immortal pavilion's bell of the immortal Tao. 2 supreme divine treasures and 6 self-release realm experts would be sufficient to deal with any expert. The Pope thought about it and then nodded. Alright. 6 self-release realm experts and 2 supreme divine objects. Let alone a single Yi Xian, even the 2 of them could not defeat them. They were also at the self-release realm. Of course, they were slightly stronger, but one could not defeat 5 or 6. That would be too exaggerated. And Yi Xian was only at the Shattering Void tier. Even with that whatever formation of the 5th dimension, he could not defeat 6 self-release realm elites. Moreover, there were also 2 supreme divine objects. Li Mian did not say anything else. Although he also felt that Yi Xian was not simple, this lineup was enough to sweep through most forces in the Tao world, let alone in the 5th dimension. At this time, the Pope suddenly said, "Is there any movement in Tao Village?" Tao Village. Another super force of the Tao world and also the most mysterious force. Jiang Yu shook his head. Until now there has been no movement. Hearing this, the Pope frowned deeply. With the appearance of the Tao scripture, it was impossible for Tao village to remain indifferent. Regarding this Tao village, he had to be on guard. He did not want to be the fisherman who reaped the benefits. At this time, Jiang Yu suddenly said, "Let's deal with this Yi Xian first. If the Tao scripture is really in his hands, then it will save us trouble. If it is not in his hands, then it is also fine. We can deal with him in passing and remove a disaster." The Pope nodded. Yi Xian was related to Yi Qingji, and they had also participated in the Yi clan's massacre. Thus to them, whether the Tao scripture was in Yi Xian's hands or not, Yi Xian must die. Jiang Yu suddenly said, "There is no time to lose. Let our people act as soon as possible." The Pope nodded. Very soon, the 6 super self-released tier elites of the Tao world left the Tao world. Chapter 12:19. The 5-dimensional universe. Yi Xian came to the land of immortality. The old blacksmith was still forging. He was about to leave when a voice came from the thatched hut. 2 hours is enough. 2 hours. Yi Xian nodded slightly. In fact, he was very much looking forward to it. This was because during this period of time, Guan Yin had sent him countless heavenly treasures and various forging materials. Some of them were even sent from the 6th dimension. It could be said that if this old blacksmith was successful, then this human king shield would be unprecedentedly powerful. He was still very confident in the old blacksmith. At this time, the voice of the 9th floor suddenly sounded. "Kid, can you give me some of the pills that you asked Xiao Linger to refine?" Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Senior, what do you want pills for?" The 9th floor said angrily. "Of course it's to eat." Yi Xian was a little stunned. "You also eat pills?" The 9th floor said. "I also want to cultivate, okay?" Yi Xian's expression became a little strange. The 9th floor said, "Kid, in your heart am I very, very powerful?" Yi Xian quickly nodded. "Yes, in my heart, Senior belongs to the Tendo level." He was not lying. In his heart, the 9th floor should be very powerful. This was a man who had once fought with the Prophet. The 9th floor sighed. "I underestimated the speed of your growth. Your growth is too fast. Your enemies are also getting stronger and stronger. Now your enemies are all self-release realm. I think it won't be long before your enemies become above self-release realm. Kid, haven't you noticed? There are more and more people around you who can't keep up with your footsteps." Yi Xian was silent. Now besides in Lanxiu and a few others, no one else could keep up with his footsteps. The 9th floor said again. "It's too dangerous to follow you. I'm already feeling the pressure. I'm afraid that one day I'll be killed in an instant." Yi Xian, the 9th floor said. "I only have 2 requests. If there are any cultivation resources, give me some. When the time comes, let me have a look at the Tao scripture. Other than that, I have no other requests." Tao scriptures. Yi Xian smiled. "Senior, your real goal is this Tao scripture, right?" The 9th replied, "Yes." Yi Xian nodded. "If there are any Taoist scriptures in the study, I will definitely lend them to you." The person on the 9th floor said, "How refreshing." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Speaking of which, Senior, what is your true identity?" He was very curious about the 9th floor. "I don't have much of a background," the man replied. "I'm just a rogue cultivator. However, I like to go on adventures and have had a lot of good fortune in the past. At that time it was quite an achievement. However, after following you for this period of time, I realized that I'm very insignificant." Yi Xian said, "Are you talking about the woman in the plain dress?" The 9th floor said softly, "Not only her but also this Tendo. To tell you the truth, I used to look down on Tendo as well, thinking that Tendo wasn't all that great. Perhaps it's because of the bad habits of cultivators. Once you reach a certain level, you'll think that you're higher than the heavens. But it's good that I'm not like some people who try to defy the heavens. If I did, I would have ended up worse. This woman is 100 times scarier than the Prophet." 5th dimension Tendo. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. It was obvious that the ninth floor was afraid of this Moon Yanyan. But that was to be expected. This woman wasn't just good at fighting, she was also good at scheming. How terrifying. The ninth floor continued, Kid, you really should be thankful that this woman has no ill intentions towards you. Otherwise, other than the woman in the plain dress, no one would be able to protect you. That's not right. If she had any ill intentions towards you, she would have killed her before she left. Just kill her. Xian asked, Senior, can you sense how strong the Tendo is? The ninth floor said, I can't. I can't sense any of this woman's aura. If she doesn't make a move, I'll think she's just an ordinary person. Xian was silent. He had always been curious about Moon Yanyan's strength. But that woman would always say, she can't defeat the woman in the plain dress. The ninth floor said, actually, compared to her strength, I'm more interested in her goal. Goal? Xian said in a low voice. Her purpose is to protect this universe. The ninth floor said, Maybe. Xian frowned. Senior, do you think that's not her only goal? In any case, I think that if she wants to protect this universe, it's simple. She can just send you away, you scourge, and leave the people in this universe to fend for themselves. 10,000 years later, this universe will slowly recover its spiritual energy. But now she didn't do that. Not only that, she's helping you. Helping you is equivalent to helping the living beings of this universe. It's a bit contradictory. Xian nodded. I've thought about that too. The ninth floor asked, do you have an answer? Xian said softly, she told me before. She said that if there's no life in this universe, wouldn't this universe be very lonely? The ninth floor was silent. Xian smiled bitterly. No matter what, we can only take one step at a time. The ninth floor said, it's a good thing that she doesn't have any evil intentions towards you. Just as Xian was about to speak, the wooden house in the distance suddenly opened, and the old blacksmith walked out. In the old blacksmith's hand was a black round shield. Xian hurried over. Senior. The old blacksmith's face was a bit pale. Obviously, forging this had taken a lot of his energy. The old blacksmith handed the shield to Xian. For you. Xian took the shield. It was very light in his hand. The entire shield was very simple and didn't have any patterns at all. It was like a piece of scrap metal. Xian looked at the old blacksmith. The old blacksmith suddenly tapped the shield with his fingers. The shield shook violently, and then a black light entered the space between Xian's brows. Boom. Xian's body shook violently. Soon a small black shield mark appeared between his brows. The old blacksmith said, this shield can block at least 80% of the power of a self-release realm expert. Xian blinked. Not 100%? The old blacksmith glared at Xian. Do you think that self-release realm experts are trash? 100% power. Aren't you thinking too much? Xian smiled. That's right, if this thing could block the power of a self-release realm expert, then it would be too monstrous. Could be said that with his physical body and this shield, it was impossible for an ordinary self-release realm expert to kill him. And now the fifth dimension had Qianmo, Audio and the others. Adding on the array, it could be said that the fifth dimension had the ability to resist self-release realm experts. It had the power to fight against the Tao world. The old blacksmith suddenly said, there are strong and weak self-release realm experts and you can't underestimate them. Don't underestimate them just because you have a strong physical body in this item. They can reach the self-release realm, so they are definitely not ordinary people. In any case, be careful. Xian nodded. He naturally didn't dare to underestimate self-release realm experts. As if thinking of something, Xian looked at the old blacksmith. Senior, do you know about the Tao world? The old blacksmith shook his head. I don't. With that, he turned and left. Xian glanced at the old blacksmith. He had to say that this old man was quite mysterious. Without thinking too much, Xian bowed slightly to the cabin and then turned around to leave. After Xian returned to the Wu clan, he went into seclusion. He fused with the Black Shield. He didn't change its name and the shield was still called Human King Shield. What he needed to do now was to perfectly fuse with the Human King Shield, to the point where they were in perfect harmony. Fortunately, this Human King Shield had been with him before, so the fusion went smoothly. While Xian was in seclusion, the fifth-dimensional universe was also rapidly developing. This was especially so for Old Li and the others. Thousands of array masters were frantically researching day and night. They only had one goal, and that was to make the fifth-dimensional array even more powerful. Xiao Ling was still refining pills. She didn't feel tired at all, and instead she felt that it was fun. This was because she had tens of thousands of alchemists by her side, and these alchemists all listened to her. She was the leader of the alchemists. It was also because of her that the overall strength of the fifth dimension improved so quickly. Sword Sect. The Sword Sect was the focus of nurturing, and it could be said that the entire Sword Sect improved the fastest. Among them, senior sister Lu had already reached half-step self-separation, and not only that, the swordsmen in the Sword Sect had basically reached the Shattering Void tier. In addition, the Sword Sect had also absorbed countless talented swordsmen in the fifth dimension. After absorbing these swordsmen, the number of people in the Sword Sect also slowly increased. It was worth mentioning that the nurturing of the Sword Sect was carried out in secret. Thus, in the fifth dimension, apart from Guan Yin and a few others, no one knew the overall strength of the Sword Sect. In Guan Yin's words, the Sword Sect was a super trump card of the fifth dimension. Guan Yin had really invested a lot in the Sword Sect. Because she had fought with the Sword Sect, she had a very clear understanding of these swordsmen. These swordsmen's battle prowess was top-notch, and their talent was also top-notch. If they improved, then their battle prowess would definitely be very terrifying. It could be said that the Sword Sect was the only super force in the fifth dimension that was not weak even in the Dao realm. Thus, Guan Yin gave the majority of the resources to the Sword Sect. In addition, she also let the craftsmen forge all kinds of top-notch treasured swords for the swordsmen of the Sword Sect. Now, the equipment of the Sword Sect had also undergone an earth-shattering change. It should be said that the entire fifth dimension had undergone an earth-shattering change. In front of Yi Xian's room, Guan Yin stood quietly. In fact, she knew that whether the fifth dimension could withstand it all depended on Yi Xian. Yi Xian was now the core. If the fifth dimension did not have Yi Xian, this alliance would instantly fall apart because no one dared to take the lead. Resist the Dao realm? Resist the fifth dimension calamity? In the current fifth dimension, who had this ability? Thus, Yi Xian's strength could determine the fate of the fifth dimension. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared beside Guan Yin. It was Qianemo. Qianemo looked at Yi Xian's room. What is he doing? Guan Yin said, cultivating. Qianemo looked at Yi Xian's room and did not say anything. Guan Yin looked at Qian. Senior, do you have something to discuss with him? Qianemo was silent. Her bloodline was showing signs of breaking through, but it was still lacking a little bit. And that little bit she could not grasp it no matter what. She did not waste the energy during their dual cultivation. It was really too wasteful. If she could do it again, she would definitely not be so wasteful. P.S. Are there any less serious jobs? Introduce them to me. I want to write while working. Chapter 12:20. Bloodline. Qianemo knew that this was a great opportunity for her. If her bloodline could break through, her strength would undergo a qualitative change. Although she was already in the self-release tier, self-release tiers were also divided into strong and weak. Strictly speaking, the self-release tier was divided into lower tier, middle tier, and upper tier. And now she could barely be considered lower tier. Thus she came to find Yi Xian this time wanting to break through her bloodline. Guan Yin glanced at Qianemo but did not speak. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian walked out of the room. When he saw Guan Yin and Qianemo, Yi Xian paused slightly, then smiled and said, "You were waiting for me?" Guan Yin nodded. She walked in front of Yi Xian. "I came to remind you that you have to at least break through to the return to origin shattering tier." Yi Xian nodded. Understood. He naturally understood that his greatest problem now was actually his cultivation level. His cultivation level was too low. If he could reach the return to origin shattering tier and half-step self-release tier, he could even kill ordinary self-release tier elites. However, he had just broken through to the shattering void tier, and it was really not suitable for him to continue breaking through to the return to origin shattering tier in a short period of time. Guan Yin nodded slightly. She hesitated, then said, "There is one more thing that you should know, Your Majesty Dao Yi." Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" Guan Yin said gravely, "The cultivation resources can at most last for half a month." Half a month? Yi Xian frowned slightly. "That's it." Guan Yin nodded. "In this period of time, my spirit of dark, the Holy Church, and the ancient race have taken out almost all of our resources, and now we can't hold on much longer." Yi Xian asked, "Do you have any other ideas?" Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. There is no better way. Xian was silent. He had almost forgotten something. In this period of time, the reason why the fifth dimension could improve comprehensively, and countless people experienced earth-shattering changes, was because of the contribution of resources from the spirit of dark and other races. And now, the spirit of dark and other races could no longer hold on. Resources? Xian frowned. Guan Yin suddenly said, "We can still hold on for half a month. Think of something." With that, she turned around and left. She was really helpless when it came to resources. He couldn't plunder the sixth dimension, right? Although the current fifth dimension was already powerful enough, starting a war with the sixth dimension was akin to digging one's own grave. Once the sixth dimension and the Tao world joined hands, the fifth dimension would have no chance of winning. After Guan Yin left, Xian looked at Qianemo and asked with a smile, "Miss Qianemo, is something the matter?" Qianemo looked at Xian. "My bloodline is about to break through." Xian was slightly taken aback before he smiled and said, "That's a good thing." Qianemo stared at Xian. "Just a little bit more." Xian asked, "Do you need my help?" Qianemo looked at Xian and didn't say anything. Xian shook his head and smiled. "Miss Qianemo, if you need any help you can tell me. I Xian will do my best." Qianemo was silent for a long time before she said, "I need your bloodline power to help." Xian was stunned before he softly said, "Double." Qianemo suddenly looked at Xian. In the next moment she and Xian disappeared. Soon the two of them appeared in a void. This was a sealed space. When they appeared in this sealed space, Qianemo pointed at Xian's chest and took out the world prison pagoda from Xian's body. Of course, this was with Xian's cooperation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to control the world prison pagoda. After closing the world prison pagoda, Qianemo looked at Xian and said, "It's just cultivation." After she finished speaking, her and Xian's clothes instantly turned to ashes. Soon the two of them intertwined. There was only one thought in Xian's mind: "I've been raped. I can't resist. I can't do anything." When the two of them fused again, the blood in their bodies started to boil again. The two bloodlines intertwined. Of course, the one who benefited the most was Qianemo. This was because Xian's bloodline power was stronger than hers. Her bloodline could borrow Xian's bloodline power to break through. Just like that, time slowly passed. During this time, the two of them didn't just enjoy themselves like the first time. Instead, they used the dual cultivation technique that Tendo gave them. This time, the two of them didn't want to waste it. Gradually, rays of blood-red light appeared around the two of them. This blood-red light wrapped around the two of them and was slowly absorbed by them. Their auras also became stronger and stronger, especially Qianemo. Her aura was growing at a visible rate. About 4 hours later, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from Qianmo's body. This powerful aura directly pushed Xian dozens of feet away. Xian looked at Qianemo in the distance. Qianmo's eyes were slowly closed. In her body, countless blood vessels bulged. He could clearly see the blood flowing quickly in her blood vessels. Her bloodline was about to break through. Xian looked at himself. His aura had also become much stronger. However, it was still far from Qianmo's. Xian shook his head. He was just a free tool. At this moment, Qianmo's body gradually calmed down. She opened her eyes. Xian walked in front of Qianmo. "How is it?" Qianmo slowly clenched her right hand. A powerful force quickly gathered in her right arm. Seeing this scene, the corners of Qianmo's mouth slightly rose. She was now at least at the Release One realm. In addition, her bloodline power had already broken through the shackles of her bloodline. Could be said that she was at the peak of the Release One realm. Qianmo looked at Xian. "You didn't break through?" Xian shook his head. "I just feel that my cultivation has become a bit stronger. However, I didn't break through." Qianmo frowned. After a moment she said in a low voice, "Your bloodline is too strong." She had to say that she was somewhat shocked. Her mortal bloodline could be said to be the strongest bloodline. Even the demonic path family's demonic path bloodline and the emperor bloodline of the emperor clans couldn't compare. However, from the looks of it, Xian's bloodline was even stronger than hers. What kind of bloodline was this? Qianmo looked at Xian as if she was looking at a monster. Xian shook his head. "I'm afraid it will be very difficult for my bloodline to break through." Qianmo nodded. "Indeed." Xian took out a robe and put it on Qianmo. Qianmo looked at Xian and didn't say anything. She just let Yi Xian put on the robe for her. Yi Xian didn't do anything while helping Qian Emo put on the robe. He looked at Qian Emo and said, "Miss Qian Emo, no matter what, congratulations." Qian Emo nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, she suddenly stopped and said, "It's just for cultivation." After saying that, she disappeared into the end of the starry sky. Cultivation. Yi Xian smiled and turned to leave. At that moment, Qian Emo suddenly appeared in front of him. Yi Xian was stunned. "Miss Qian Emo?" Qian Emo suddenly grabbed his shoulder. A moment later, the two of them appeared on a snowy mountain. This was the place where Qian Emo had been sealed in the past. Qian Emo pointed at the ice palace in the depths of the mountain. "There are many financial resources that I brought from the Tao world in there. A lot." After saying that, she disappeared. In the same place, Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he went to the ice palace. Soon he found a treasury. When he saw the treasures inside, Yi Xian was completely dumbfounded. There was an extraordinary amount of treasures. In fact, there was something that Qian Emo didn't say. Not only did she bring the treasures from the Tao world, but there were also treasures that she had robbed in the 5th dimension. However, this wasn't important to her now. To her, how to break through was the most important thing. Although she had lost her freedom while Tendo had sealed her, it was also this opportunity that allowed her to break through to the self-release realm. This made her understand that strength was the king. Everything else was useless. Yi Xian scanned the entire treasury. Then, with a wave of his right hand, he stored all the treasures in the prison pagoda. With these resources, he could temporarily solve the resource problem of the 5th dimension. Yi Xian turned and left. After returning to the Wu clan, Yi Xian handed all the financial resources of the treasury to Guan Yin. Guan Yin glanced at Yi Xian but didn't ask anything. Although she didn't ask, she was still a little shocked. In such a short time, where did Yi Xian get all these treasures? After Yi Xian gave the treasures to Guan Yin, he left. Soon Yi Xian arrived at the Worldwide Academy. At this time, the academy was also gradually expanding. The elites that had left the academy had basically all returned. It was worth mentioning that teacher had also reached the Shattering Void tier. Moreover, her battle prowess could completely crush ordinary Return to Origin Shattering tier elites. Of course, this time he didn't come to find teacher. Instead, he came to find Zhang Wenxiu. In a courtyard, Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu sat opposite each other. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu, smiled and said, "It feels like we haven't seen each other for many years." Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, "We haven't seen each other for a long time. Have you become more glib?" Yi Xian smiled, then said seriously, "Wenxiu, I want to tell you something about your teacher." In the end, he still chose to tell Zhang Wenxiu and teacher about the relationship between him and the prophet. He didn't want to lie to Zhang Wenxiu. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian was about to speak when Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, "No need to say anything." Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Zhang Wenxiu said softly, "You are you, teacher is teacher. I respect teacher like a father, but for you," Yi Xian smiled, "it's love." Zhang Wenxiu shook his head, "You've become more thick-skinned." Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. "To be honest, I'm already very happy that you came to talk to me. And one more thing, I'm with you not because I think you're teacher." Yi Xian smiled, "I know that." Zhang Wenxiu nodded, "Don't tell teacher. She cares about teacher very much, but teacher is already in the past. Moreover, she now believes that you are teacher. In fact, it's nothing. You've received teacher's inheritance, so it's understandable that you bear his karma." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. It had to be said that there were good and bad karma of the prophet. Zhang Wenxiu was about to speak, but at this moment she and Yi Xian suddenly looked up at the same time. In the depths of the starry sky, 6 powerful auras suddenly appeared. Following the appearance of these 6 powerful auras, the starry sky immediately boiled up. The Tao world had arrived. Yi Xian was about to leave when Zhang Wenxiu grabbed his hand. "I'll go with you." Yi Xian was about to speak, but Zhang Wenxiu shook her head. "We'll live and die together." Chapter 12:21. Together in life and death. Yi Xian felt warmth in his heart. Ever since he met Zhang Wenxiu, the two of them had spent very little time together. However, their feelings for each other were very real. There were no words of love between the two of them, but in Yi Xian's eyes, it was enough to say that they were together in life and death. Yi Xian left the Worldwide Academy with Zhang Wenxiu. and the two of them headed straight for the starry sky. When the two of them arrived in the starry sky, two women were already there. They were Xianxia and Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi glanced at Yi Xian and shrugged. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu but did not say anything. The atmosphere was a little awkward. At this time Guan Yin appeared in the field. Everyone looked at Guan Yin and Guan Yin said softly, "What should come has come." Saying so, she looked at Yi Xian and asked, "What do you plan to do?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Why don't we have a chat first?" The women, Yi Xian laughed and then turned into a streak of sword light that soared into the sky. Soon Yi Xian led the women to the depths of the starry sky and there they saw 6 people. The leaders were Li Mian and Mo Dao. This time the two of them were leading the group. Li Mian glanced at Yi Xian and her heart relaxed slightly. Yi Xian was still in the shattering void tier and had not broken through. But soon her eyes moved down and fell on Xianxia and the others. When seeing these women, Li Mian could not help but frown. Although these women's cultivation levels were low, he could feel their strength. Freaks. There were still freaks in this Dao realm. Li Mian collected his thoughts and looked at Yi Xian and said, "Young Master Yi, you should know who we are." Yi Xian nodded and said, "We are from the Dao realm." Li Mian nodded and said, "Yes." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Are you all here for the Dao scripture?" Li Mian smiled and said, "Young Master Yi is indeed a straightforward person. That's right, we're here for that scripture." Yi Xian said solemnly, "You're late." Li Mian frowned. "What does young Master Yi mean?" Yi Xian said with a straight face, "That scripture has been taken away by the ancient temple." Hearing this, everyone was shocked. All the girls looked at Yi Xian with strange expressions. Somewhere high up in the clouds, a woman dressed in monk robes frowned deeply. "How can you speak so carelessly?" In the starry sky, Li Mian looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, is what you said true?" Yi Xian said seriously, "It's true." Li Mian shook his head. "I don't really believe it." Yi Xian sighed. "Not long ago, 3 self-release realm experts came to the ancient temple. They captured my friend, the 5th dimension Tendo, and said that if I didn't hand over the scripture they would kill the 5th dimension Tendo. I had no choice but to hand it over." Li Mian frowned. "You're willing to hand over the scripture for a 5th dimension Tendo?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "If you don't believe me you can go ask Gu Shi." Li Mian looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, "I'm a swordsman. A swordsman will not lie against his conscience." Li Mian was silent. Most of the swordsmen he knew were proud. Those swordsmen had bad tempers and disdained to lie. Could it really have been taken away by Gu Shi? But he still did not believe that Yi Xian would hand over the scripture for the 5th dimension Tendo. Yi Xian suddenly said, "I can swear to the heavens." Everyone, Yi Xian looked at Li Mian. "It's true, I can swear. Also, I, Yi Xian, am the #1 swordsman of the 5th dimension. Why would I lie? Aren't you looking down on me too much?" Li Mian was silent. At this time Yi Xian said, "Everyone, to tell you the truth, I, Yi Xian, know my own limits. I know that I can't keep this scripture. If I hand it over I can live longer. Therefore I gave it to the ancient temple. If you fight with me now it will only make the ancient temple laugh." Li Mian did not say anything. Mo Dao beside him said, "This person's words are half true and half false." Li Mian looked at Mo Dao. Mo Dao said, "However, according to what I know, the ancient temple has indeed sent people to the 5th dimension." Li Mian said, "In other words, it is very likely that the ancient temple has obtained the study." Mo Dao nodded. "That is a possibility. However, this Yi Xian does not look like a good person. His words cannot be trusted." Li Mian said, "But as he said, if we fight with him it will only benefit Gu Shi." Mo Dao nodded. "That is indeed the case." Li Mian was silent. At this time he suddenly felt conflicted. Should he fight with Yi Xian? In truth, although they had 6 self-release realm experts on their side, they were still a bit afraid of Yi Xian and that array from before. The 5th dimension was not without a fighting chance. At this time an old man suddenly appeared. This old man was wearing monk robes and had no hair. He wore a string of prayer beads on his neck. Seeing this person, Li Mian and the others became vigilant. Danger. The ancient temple. The Dao world did not dare to underestimate a mysterious place like the ancient temple. The old monk put his palms together and looked at Yi Xian. "Benefactor Yi, how can you speak without thinking? My ancient temple has never obtained the study from you. Xian suddenly pointed at the old monk. You are the one who is speaking without thinking. You sent 6 self-release realm experts to the lower realm and captured the 5th dimension Tendo. You want me to hand over the study or you will kill the 5th dimension Tendo and destroy the 5th dimension. You dare to say that this was not done by you? The old monk was dumbfounded. My ancient temple has never done this. How can you say that? Xian's expression became somewhat sinister. You are too shameless. Not only did you snatch the study, you don't even admit it. Oh, I understand. You want to use our 5th dimension to fight with the Tao world and then reap the benefits. Hearing this, Li Mian and the others looked at the old monk. The old monk shook his head. Young Master Yi, my ancient temple indeed wants to obtain the study. However, due to some reasons we have never taken action. What you said is venomous slander. Xian sneered. Due to some reasons we have never taken action. I am very curious, what is the reason? The old monk glanced at Xian. The person behind young Master Yi is not simple. That 5th dimension Tendo is even more so. Young Master Yi just said that we captured the 5th dimension Tendo. Saying this, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Young Master Ye's words are really funny. That 5th dimension Tendo is not simple. My ancient temple does not have the ability to capture her. The ancient temple is very afraid of the 5th dimension Tendo because this woman is really unfathomable. At this moment, Li Mian suddenly said, Master, are you joking? How can a 5th dimension Tendo not be simple? The old monk looked at Li Mian. Haven't you come into contact with Miss Mu? Li Mian smiled. We haven't. However, how capable can a mere Tendo be? The old monk sighed softly. Tao world. How can you be so stupid? Everyone was speechless. Li Mian stared at the old monk. Are you insulting my Tao world? The old monk shook his head. I have no intention of insulting the Tao world. I am just expressing my feelings. 5th dimension Tendo. That woman's strength is unfathomable. However, the Tao world actually thinks that she is very weak. Is this a joke? Li Mian looked at the old monk. I feel that the study is very likely to be in your hands. The old monk frowned slightly. Why? Li Mian smiled. First, Xian is the first swordsman of the 5th dimension. This kind of person, I believe he will not lie. In fact, I should say that he disdains lying. Second, I feel that it is impossible for your ancient temple not to fight for the study. Therefore, when Xian said that you imprisoned a 5th dimension Tendo, I don't think it is nonsense. It is true. Xian was speechless. The old monk looked at Li Mian. According to what I know, the Tao world's Pope is also a wise man. Why would he send an idiot like you down? Could it be that he sent you down to be a joke? Everyone was speechless. Li Mian stared at the old monk. In the next moment he disappeared. In the distance the old monk shook his head. Amit ba retard. After saying that he slapped out with his palm. With this palm, a huge golden palm print crossed the starry sky. Boom. With a violent explosion, a figure retreated rapidly in the starry sky. The person who retreated was Li Mian. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings instantly became extremely solemn when they witnessed this scene. Especially Xian. The gap between the self-release realm was so huge. Wasn't this old monk too good at fighting? At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Be careful. This person is at least at the upper self-release realm. The upper self-release realm. Xian looked at the old monk with vigilance in his heart. In the distance, Li Mian looked at his cracked right hand, and then he looked up at the old monk with disbelief in his eyes. The upper self-release realm. The old monk pressed his palms together. That study isn't in my ancient temple. As he spoke, he turned to look at Xian. Young Master Yi, what my ancient temple did is what it did. If it didn't, then it didn't. Young Master Yi, please clear my ancient temple's name. Xian glanced at the old monk. You're amazing. I don't dare to refute anything you say. The old monk was dumbfounded. What are you saying? In the distance, Li Mian suddenly spoke solemnly. Master, you said that the study isn't in your hands. Do you have any proof? The old monk frowned. Young Master Yi said that it's in my ancient temple. Do you have any proof? Li Mian looked at Xian. Xian said solemnly, the 5th dimension Tendo is in your hands. The old monk stared at Xian. Young Master Yi, you said that the 5th dimension Tendo is in my ancient temple's hands. Do you have any proof? Yi Xian looked at Li Mian. If you don't believe me, you can search the ancient temple. The fifth dimension Tendo is definitely in their ancient temple. Hearing this, Li Mian looked at the old monk. The old monk shook his head. My ancient temple doesn't allow outsiders to step in. How can I let you search? Yi Xian looked at Li Mian. He shrugged. I won't speak anymore. The old monk. Li Mian stared at the old monk. Master, does your ancient temple not have the courage to admit what you've done? The old monk shook his head and sighed. Fool, this old monk has nothing to say to you. As he spoke, he suddenly struck out with his palm. Seeing this, Li Mian's expression changed and he hurriedly said, Attack. As he spoke, he and the few self-release realm experts beside him charged out. P.S. I wanted to have an offline gathering, but I suddenly realized that if it's a gathering, I might be in danger. Many readers have unhealthy thoughts. Chapter 12:22. Seeing Li Ming and the others rushing over, the old monk frowned. He did not choose to fight, instead glancing at Yi Xian. Then his body turned illusory and he quickly disappeared. He left. Seeing this, Yi Xian, who was not far away, hurried to say, He's running away. However, when Li Mian and the others arrived in front of the old monk had already disappeared. He had escaped. Seeing the old monk escape, Li Mian's expression became unsightly. At this time, the nearby Yi Xian suddenly said, If we let the ancient temple learn the Tao scripture, who would be their match? Too terrifying. Li Mian glanced at Yi Xian, not saying anything. A moment later, Li Mian suddenly said, Let's go. Finished speaking, he led Mo Dao and the others and disappeared. After Li Mian and the others disappeared, the nearby Guan Yin suddenly wanted to say something, but Yi Xian shook his head. AI, it's a pity for my Tao scripture. This damned ancient temple. Hearing this, Guan Yin immediately shut his mouth. Soon Yi Xian and the experts of the fifth dimension disappeared into the starry sky while cursing. However, Li Mian and the others appeared again. Li Mian looked at Yi Xian below, silent. No one knew what he was thinking. Mo Dao suddenly said, You don't believe his words, right? Li Mian calmly said, Of course not. Mo Dao glanced at Li Mian. Just now, you deliberately attacked in anger for him to see. Mo Dao softly said, If we fight to the death with Yi Xian, do you think the ancient temple will just watch? Mo Dao shook his head. They will wait to reap the benefits. Li Mian nodded. Yes. Therefore we must pull the ancient temple into this. Mo Dao frowned. Will the ancient temple get involved? Li Mian softly said, Just now Yi Xian framed the ancient temple. Do you think they will feel good? Saying this, he coldly smiled. The ancient temple will definitely not feel good. Therefore, as long as we operate a little, we can definitely join hands with the ancient temple and deal with Yi Xian together. Mo Dao said with a smile, Brilliant. Not only will it deepen the conflict between the ancient temple and Yi Xian, but it will also numb Yi Xian, making him think that we are all fools. Li Mian said softly, The Tao scripture is of great importance, so we have to be cautious. If we're not careful, we might be consigned to eternal damnation. As he spoke, he looked down. The fifth dimension isn't as simple as we think it is. If we underestimate it, we will be consigned to eternal damnation. Mo Dao nodded. During this period of contact with Yi Xian, he also discovered that Yi Xian was not simple. It should be said that the entire fifth dimension was not simple. He hadn't forgotten the might of the formation from before. Li Mian suddenly said, You guys stay here and don't do anything. I will go to the ancient temple and the Union Hall. If possible, try to ally with them. During this time, don't do anything and wait for my news. Mo Dao nodded. Alright. Li Mian seemed to think of something and said, Send someone to investigate the fifth dimension's Tendo and see what kind of person he is. Mo Dao nodded. I will go personally. Li Mian nodded slightly and disappeared into the horizon. Below, Yi Xian went directly to the pawnshop. Qianmo was the only one there. Qianmo looked at Yi Xian. The ancient temple is not simple. Yi Xian nodded. Qianmo, do you know the origin of the ancient temple? Qianmo shook her head. I don't know. I don't think anyone in the Tao world knows. This faction is extremely mysterious. Yi Xian frowned. Extremely mysterious? Qianmo nodded. No one knows how long they have existed. I only know that the Tao world feared the most in the sixth dimension. The ancient temple. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. I'm very curious. Why didn't they make a move directly? Yi Xian said softly. Could it be that they were afraid that the Dao world would reap the benefits if they made a move on me first? Qianemo looked at Yi Xian. That is possible. However, I feel that they are more afraid of you. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he smiled. Afraid of what? Qianemo shook her head. You are also very mysterious. Yi Xian was speechless. Qianemo suddenly said, no matter what, you have to guard against this ancient temple. Yi Xian nodded. Miss Qianemo, can you defeat that old monk? Qianemo said in a deep voice, I can only fight him. I am not confident of defeating him. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. After saying that, he turned and left. Qianemo suddenly said, I did not agree to help you fight. Yi Xian stopped and turned around with a smile. I did not ask Miss Qianemo to help me fight either. Qianemo looked at Yi Xian. My intuition tells me that you are very dangerous. Yi Xian smiled. I did not restrict Miss Qianemo. Miss Qianemo, you can leave at any time if you want. Really? After saying that, he opened his palm and Qianmo's soul floated in front of her. Then he turned and left. In the pawn shop, Qianemo looked at the soul in front of her in a daze. That fellow handed over his soul just like that? Without any conditions? Qianemo was silent for a long time. Then she looked in the direction that Yi Xian left with a complicated look in her eyes. After leaving the pawn shop, Yi Xian returned to the Wu clan. He went to look for Guan Yin, Old Li and the others. Yi Xian looked at Old Li. Old Li, what is the level of the array formation now? Old Li said in a deep voice, give me 5 more days. 5 days. Yi Xian frowned. Guan Yin suddenly said, you don't believe that Li Mian? Yi Xian nodded. If he is an idiot, how could he reach self-release? This person does not look like an idiot. What I am most worried about is that they will join hands with the ancient temple to deal with me first. Guan Yin nodded. That is highly possible. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, they will join hands with the ancient temple. This is the worst-case scenario. Therefore we have to prepare for the worst. After saying that, he looked at Old Li. Old Li, we still need to speed up. Old Li nodded. I will do my best. After saying that, he stood up and left. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. How is the sword sect? Guan Yin said, if they make a move, they will definitely give you a pleasant surprise. Yi Xian nodded. You have worked hard during this period of time. Needless to say, Guan Yin's ability was extremely formidable. Especially her management ability. She was able to balance so many powers in the 5th dimension and manage everything in an orderly manner. This was truly rare. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. I am doing this for myself in the spirit race. Yi Xian smiled. No matter what, Miss Guan Yin, I hope that we will be able to work together happily in the future. Guan Yin said in a low voice, I have a question. Can you answer me honestly? Yi Xian nodded. Go ahead. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian. How strong is that green-clothed man? This was a knot in her heart. All those years ago, that green-clothed man had almost annihilated the entire spirit race with a single sword strike. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, his strength should be on par with that woman in a plain dress. When she heard this, Guan Yin's tightly clenched fists loosened slowly. Or it should be said that her entire body seemed to have relaxed quite a bit. Revenge had always been a knot in her heart, but after she found out about the green-clothed man's strength, this knot in her heart had suddenly been undone. Can I take revenge? I definitely can't. An expert on par with that woman in a plain dress. What sort of concept was that? If the spirit race continued to take revenge, then they would be courting death. She could give up on taking revenge in a justifiable manner. It wasn't that she didn't want to take revenge, it was that she really couldn't. Yi Xian looked at Guan Yin. Miss Guan, are you all right? Guan Yin shook her head. What could possibly happen to me? Yi Xian nodded. It's good that you're fine. Miss Guan, I'll leave the matters here to you. I'll be going now. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Within the hall, Guan Yin shook her head and smiled bitterly. What sort of monster did the spirit race offend all those years ago? Yi Xian arrived at a riverside and he found Audiobook and Situ in a bamboo house by the riverside. Yi Xian smiled. Greetings, senior sister. Greetings, senior Situ. Situ said indifferently, What's the matter? Yi Xian said seriously. Senior sister, Senior Situ, both of you should have seen that old monk's strength earlier. Is there a huge difference between the two of you? Situ nodded. There's a gap between us in terms of cultivation realm. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what about in terms of combat strength? Situ shrugged. I haven't fought him so I don't know. Yi Xian looked at Audiobook and Audiobook said softly, we'll only know after we fight. We'll only know after we fight. Yi Xian's heart relaxed slightly. This proves that these two can fight that old monk. Audiobook suddenly said, the two of us can block two self-release realm experts for you. If it's someone like that old monk, the two of us can join forces and block them for you. However, your opponents don't seem to be just that, so you have to make more preparations, understand? Yi Xian nodded. I know. Audiobook nodded. Go and do your work. We will make a move when it's time. Yi Xian hurriedly said, thank you, senior sister. After saying that, he turned and left. Sita looked at Yi Xian's back view and said softly, Audiobook, if you get involved in this whirlpool, you might not have a good ending. Audiobook said casually, just do it. What's the point of thinking so much? Situ shook her head. Do people who drink have big hearts? Sixth dimension. On this day, Li Mian came to the Union Hall. The person who received him was the Union Hall's Wen Hall Master, Wen Zhaohua. In the Union Hall, Wen Zhaohua said with a smile, is something the matter? Li Mian said with a smile, Hall Master Wen should know why I'm here. Wen Zhaohua said softly, to be honest, our Union Hall doesn't want to get involved in the matters between Yi Xian and the Dao world. Li Mian looked at Wen Zhaohua. Hall Master Wen, don't you want that Dao scripture? Wen Zhaohua said with a smile, it's better not to have such a divine item. Otherwise it will only invite trouble. Our Union Hall wants to develop peacefully and seek benefits for the sixth dimension. Li Mian said with a smile, as far as I know, the Union Hall has always been helping Yi Xian. Wen Zhaohua nodded. We are only cooperating with him in exchange for some things we want. This won't affect the Dao world, right? Li Mian looked at Wen Zhaohua. Miss Wen, are you sure you won't consider joining forces with us? Wen Zhaohua shook her head. If the fifth dimension and the Dao world start a war, we won't interfere. Li Mian nodded. Understood. Goodbye. After saying that, he turned and left. After Li Mian left, Wen Zhaohua said softly, I still want to live for a few more years. Chapter 1223. Target Yi Xian? Wen Zhaohua had such thoughts before. That was because the Dao scripture was really tempting. However, every time she thought about it, she would think of a person. The plain-dressed woman. The woman who had once destroyed the Union Hall with a sword from a star domain away. That woman had almost destroyed the Union Hall and the entire six-dimensional universe. Even now, the six-dimensional universe had yet to recover its essence energy. In fact, Wen Zhaohua did not understand why the Dao world wanted to fight to the death with Yi Xian. Could it be that the plain-dressed woman was too low-key in the Dao world? She had almost destroyed the entire demon Dao family. How could she be low-key? Wen Zhaohua shook her head and sighed. She did not say anything else and turned to leave. After Li Mian left the Union Hall, he arrived at the Sacred Mountain. At the foot of the Sacred Mountain, he looked up and could vaguely see an ancient temple at the end of the mountain. Li Mian was a little curious. Besides him, the entire Dao world was curious about this ancient temple. However, even the Dao world did not know the origin of this ancient temple. Li Mian was silent for a moment. Just as he was about to go up, a voice was heard beside him. Sir, please wait. Li Mian turned around and saw an old man standing not far from him. It was the old monk who had fought with him previously. The old monk looked at Li Mian and pressed his palms together. Benefactor Li, we meet again. Li Mian also pressed his palms together. Greetings, master. The old monk nodded slightly. It seems like Benefactor Li does not believe Yi Xian's words. Li Mian smiled. Why would I believe him? Master, I came here to cooperate with you. What do you think? The old monk looked at Li Mian. Benefactor Li, please speak. Li Mian smiled. If we don't make a move, the ancient temple will not either. We are all afraid that the other party will reap the benefits. If we continue to be in a deadlock, Yi Xian will benefit for nothing. The old monk nodded in agreement. Li Mian smiled slightly. Great master, my idea is very simple. The Tao world and the ancient temple will join forces to kill Zhou Xian first. If we can kill Zhou Xian and the Tao scripture is really in his hands, then we can discuss the ownership of the Tao scripture. But before that, what we need to do is to join forces and annihilate Zhou Xian first. The old monk fell silent. Li Mian smiled and said, Grandmaster, what do you think of Zhou Xian's talent? The old monk said softly, a genius. Li Mian nodded. Although I've only fought him once, we've investigated him. He's indeed a genius. Not only that, his combat strength is extremely strong and he's also a swordsman who has comprehended sword cognition. If we continue to ignore him, he might not be someone we can deal with in the future. The old monk looked at Li Mian. Do you know where the fifth dimension Tendo is? Li Mian shook his head. I don't know. The old monk sighed softly. Although Zhou Xian is terrifying, it's fortunate that he's under control. As for the fifth dimension Tendo, it's terrifying. The thought of the fifth dimension Tendo gave him a headache. If they weren't afraid of that woman, they would have attacked long ago. Li Mian suddenly asked, is the fifth dimension Tendo very terrifying? The old monk glanced at Li Mian and said, she's not particularly terrifying, but she's a little troublesome. Li Mian smiled. How about this? If she dares to interfere with Zhou Xian's matters, let the Tao world deal with her. What do you think? The old monk looked at Li Mian. All right. Li Mian smiled slightly. When do we make our move? The old monk said softly, as soon as possible. Li Mian said, the Tao world can do it any time. The old monk said in a deep voice, once we find the fifth dimension Tendo. Li Mian nodded. All right. After saying that, he raised his head and glanced at the ancient temple on the sacred mountain. Master, have you been to the Tao world? The master shook his head slightly. No, but we know a little about the history of the Tao world. Tao world. Li Mian smiled. The ancient temple is very mysterious. The master pressed his palms together and did not say anything. Li Mian did not ask anything else and turned to leave. After we find the fifth dimension Tendo, I'll inform you. Please bring your men over then. After saying that, he was already at the end of the horizon. After Li Mian disappeared, a woman in a monk's robe suddenly appeared behind the old monk. The woman said softly, Master, I'm sorry. The old monk smiled. What are you sorry for? The woman said, I'm incompetent. I couldn't get the study. The old monk shook his head. That slippery swordsman is not someone you can fight against. The woman looked at the old monk. If we were to fight one-on-one, I might not lose to him. The old monk smiled. I know. What I mean is that in terms of intelligence he's more cunning than you. You're not suitable to fight against him. The woman pressed her palms together. Master, did the study originally belong to our ancient temple? The old monk shook his head. No. The woman frowned. Since it doesn't belong to the ancient temple, how can we snatch it by force? Isn't that violating the 5 commandments? The old monk smiled and walked up the sacred mountain. The woman quickly followed. Along the way, the old monk said softly, that item doesn't belong to the ancient temple, but it also doesn't belong to Zhou Xian and the prophet. The woman looked at the old monk. What do you mean? The old monk smiled. That Tao scripture is a divine item. In the ancient era, the heavens bestowed it to mortals to cultivate the Tao. Strictly speaking, that Tao scripture is a gift from the heavens to mortals. It's not anyone's private property. Since it's not Zhou Xian's private property, how can we say that we're violating the commandments if we take it? The woman was silent. The old monk continued. Moreover, the prophet once promised our ancient temple that he was willing to hand over the Tao scripture. Because of that, we helped him back then. However, he went back on his promise. With that said, he shook his head. Be it the prophet or Zhou Xian, they aren't good people. The woman suddenly said, Master, I feel that Zhou Xian isn't simple. If we snatch that Tao scripture, we might be tainted with great karma. The old monk nodded. Yes. This person isn't simple. If not for that Tao scripture being extremely important to our ancient temple, we wouldn't have offended him. However, we have no choice. That Tao scripture is too important to us. Even if we are tainted with great karma, we can't do anything about it. The woman said in a deep voice, Master, I've been observing the area below and I've discovered something. Do you want to hear it? The old monk nodded. Speak. The woman said, He wants to protect that universe. The old monk said, "That's a good thing." The woman looked at the old monk. "I don't think he's a bad person. At least he's doing something right." The old monk smiled. "I didn't say that he's a bad person." The woman frowned. "Then the old monk said softly, "he has something we want, so he's our enemy." It's that simple. Right and wrong are often decided by one's standpoint. The woman nodded. "Disciple understands." The old monk smiled. "Come at heart, when we look at things we often have to look at it from many angles. Every angle has a different result. Take this Zhou Xian for example. You say that he's a good person, but have you ever thought about why the fifth dimension has a fifth dimension tribulation? It's because the fifth dimension tribulation is a sin committed by all living beings. Zhou Xian is protecting that universe. From a certain perspective, he's harming the living beings of that universe and the universe itself. From the perspective of the fifth dimension, Zhou Xian is actually a bad person. Of course, from the perspective of all living beings of the fifth dimension, Zhou Xian is a good person. The woman in monk clothes called Hui Exen put her palms together. "Master, I understand." The old monk nodded slightly and smiled. "Then let's go." Soon the two disappeared at the end of the Xiaodao. After Li Mian returned to the fifth dimension, he started to search for the fifth dimension Tendo. However, he did not find the fifth dimension Tendo. It was as if the fifth dimension Tendo had evaporated from the world. In the starry sky, Li Mian and the rest gathered. Mo Dao said solemnly, "This fifth dimension Tendo is indeed not simple." Li Mian looked at Mo Dao. "What do you mean?" Mo Dao said solemnly, "I've checked. In the history of the fifth dimension, she has made a few moves. The fifth dimension's experts were miserably played by her. They are very afraid of her." Li Mian frowned. "Do you know what realm she has reached?" Mo Dao shook his head. "I don't know. However, she shouldn't be weak. Otherwise, that old monk would not be so afraid of her. In short, we have to guard against her to prevent her from ruining things." Li Mian nodded. "Naturally. When we make a move, let it be in the dark. If she makes a move, it can stop her." A self-release realm expert nodded. "All right. Don't say, I want to see how capable this so-called fifth dimension Tendo is." Li Mian nodded. "Having confidence is not a bad thing. However, don't look down on anyone, including this Tendo." De nodded. "Naturally." Li Mian looked down at the fifth dimension and said softly, "I hope that everything goes smoothly this time. Is there any movement down there?" Mo Dao shook his head. "There is no movement for the time being. I suggest that we make a move now and catch them off guard." Li Mian shook his head. "That Zhou Xian is not that stupid. This person definitely has something to rely on. Wait for the ancient temple's people to come." Mo Dao hesitated before nodding. "All right. If the ancient temple did not come, they would not dare to make a move." While Li Mian and the rest were searching for the fifth dimension Tendo, the Tendo had stealthily arrived at the Dao world. Moon Yin held a roasted fish and slowly strolled through the starry sky. As she strolled, she arrived at the Emperor clan's territory. Moon Yin looked down at the Emperor clan's people. She chewed on the roasted fish and occasionally hummed an unknown tune. Just like that, after a quarter of an hour, the fish was completely eaten by her, leaving only a bone spur. After eating, she threw the fish bone to the side and took out a set of clothes to wear. Following that, she rubbed her face. Soon she turned into a middle-aged man. Di Linyuan. This was the appearance of Di Linyuan. Moon Yin took out a mirror and looked at herself. Then she nodded in satisfaction. The next moment she swooped down from the starry sky. Soon all the Emperor clan experts raised their heads. When they saw the person rushing down, they were shocked. Patriarch is back. The entire Emperor clan was in an uproar. Soon a figure entered the Emperor clan's city. At this moment, a voice sounded from within the city, "Where is Patriarch?" Soon the matter of Di Linyuan's appearance spread throughout the Dao world. Countless experts rushed towards the Emperor clan like crazy. At the entrance of the Emperor clan's main hall, an old man's face was pale. "My God, who is playing with our Emperor clan?" Chapter 12:24. At the entrance of the palace, the old man's face was pale, his eyes filled with shock. In that instant he had thought that clan leader Di Linyuan had returned to the imperial clan. However, when he entered the city and disappeared, he knew that it was not the clan leader. Someone was messing with the imperial clan. However, what shocked him was that he couldn't catch a glimpse of the other party the moment he entered the city. He also didn't know how the other party had disappeared without a trace. Who was messing with the imperial clan? And he was so powerful. Killing without a blade. At this moment, countless powerful auras appeared in the sky above the imperial clan. There were more than 30 powerful auras. They were all at the self-release realm. Seeing this, the old man's face turned even paler. At this moment, two people appeared in front of the old man. These two people were the Pope and Jiang Yu of the Celestial Pavilion. The two of them did not go to the lower realm because they wanted to stay here to look for the plain-dressed woman and Di Linyuan. But now that Di Linyuan had appeared, there was only one explanation. The plain-dressed woman was gone. The Tao scripture was most likely on Di Linyuan. Moreover, Tianxin Abyss was likely to be severely injured. The Pope looked at the old man in front of him. "Your clan leader, please come out." The old man said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, the clan leader has not returned." The Pope frowned. He just stared at the old man, his expression calm, but it was chilling. The old man smiled bitterly. "Your Excellency, someone is framing the imperial clan." The Pope said in a low voice, "You said that before. Let me ask you, who is framing the imperial clan?" "Who is framing the imperial clan?" The old man hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know either." The Pope looked at the old man, his expression unkind. "Do you think we are all idiots?" The old man looked at the Pope and said seriously, "Your Excellency, don't you think this is a little strange?" The Pope was expressionless. "Come, tell me what is strange about it." The old man said in a low voice, "Even if the clan leader has returned, he would not have returned so openly. But he has returned so openly. Isn't this the same as telling the world that he has returned?" The Pope was silent. Jiang Yu suddenly said, "You said that someone framed your imperial clan. I'm very curious, who framed your imperial clan?" The old man shook his head. "I don't know." Jiang Yu asked again, "Di Ming, you are also in the upper level of self-release. Let me ask you, who can vanish right in front of you?" Jiang Yu fell silent. This was what terrified him the most. The other party had appeared in front of him, yet disappeared without a trace. How terrifying was his strength. Up until now, he could only think of one or two people who had this kind of strength. However, there was no reason for those two people to frame an emperor clan. So who could it be? Jiang Yu suddenly looked at the Pope. The Pope nodded slightly, and the two of them spread out their divine senses. Very quickly, their divine senses covered the entire imperial clan. Seeing this, the faces of the imperial clan and the other powerhouses darkened. When had the emperor clans ever been bullied like this? Some of the monarch races wanted to attack but were stopped by Di Ming. He was well aware of the current situation of the emperor clans. The current emperor clans were no longer the emperor clans of the past. If they were not careful, they would truly be consigned to eternal damnation. Soon the Pope and Jiang Yu frowned. Because they had yet to discover Di Linyuan's whereabouts. Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestor Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's prince position shall be removed. Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man, stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This young man was Yi Lang. Beside him were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a timid voice sounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. The little girl's name was Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan was going to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl named Yi Ling bowed at the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, "Grand Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The Grand Elder glanced at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly afraid. She didn't dare to look at the Grand Elder, but she didn't leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed at the two elders again. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the mining rights in the South Mountain. He is fighting for the clan with his life on the line and his life is unknown. But now, the clan has removed his prince position with a groundless excuse. This is unfair. How dare you? The Grand Elder suddenly said angrily. It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether he should be removed or not. Someone drag her away. At this moment the new Prince Yilang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Grand Elder said coldly, then flog him 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new Prince Yilang and knew that his chance to perform had come. The guard sneered, young Master Yilang is the heir, it's everyone's wish. Why are you shouting? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yiling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only covered her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yilang nodded slightly. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a youth was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed, his face dark and gloomy, not knowing what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time Zhou Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooey! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man. As he spoke he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Zhou Xian has no talent, no morals. From now on Zhou Xian's position will be removed and Yilang will take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a smile on his face. This person was Yilang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Zhou Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Zhou Xian, she had rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the hall and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Zhou Xian is a prince. Why did you remove him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and did not dare to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the position. This is unfair. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. Whether he is removed or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this moment the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about? With that he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up, but she did not cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and he hurriedly bowed deeply. I'm willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Zhou Xian who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, your man? As he spoke he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage and he charged in front of Zhang Mu before kicking out at Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 1225. In the sky above the Imperial clan. Di Lintian scanned his surroundings and his frown deepened. He could feel the dangerous aura around him, but he just couldn't find the other party. What was going on? Di Lintian frowned. Soon he realized that the dangerous aura had disappeared. Gone. Di Lintian slowly closed his eyes. I never thought that there would be such a powerful cultivator in this world. Di Ming asked solemnly, Ancestor, what should we do now? The Imperial Descent Tendo asked, Has our Imperial Descent clan offended anyone recently? Di Ming pondered and said, If we're talking about offense, it's probably because of Yi Xian and the lady in plain dress. Di Lintian looked at Di Ming. Plain dress lady? Di Ming nodded. Rumor has it that the scripture is in the hands of the lady and Yi Xian. Clan master has gone to look for the lady but there's no news of her. Di Lintian counted with his fingers and shook his head. He's dead. Dead. Di Ming was stunned. Moments later he shook his head and smiled bitterly. In fact, he had thought of this before because he knew Di Lingyuan's personality. Even if he had obtained the scripture he would have notified him. Di Lintian looked down at the people of the imperial family. After a moment of silence he said, "The imperial family is tainted with bad karma. This karma is related to the woman in the plain dress in Yi Xian." As he spoke he looked at Di Ming. The appearance of the Tao scripture signifies the arrival of chaos. It's impossible for the monarch races to stay out of this mess. Di Ming asked solemnly, "What should we choose?" Di Lintian said softly, "You can investigate the lady in plain dress and Yi Xian and see if they are reliable." Di Ming frowned. "With them?" Di Lintian looked up at the end of the heavens. "Many times only by following the will of the heavens can one live longer. If that scripture is really in the hands of that Yi Xian, why don't we follow the will of heaven?" Di Ming remained silent. Di Lintian said softly, "Go and get in touch with them." Di Ming looked at Di Lintian. "Ancestor, what do you think about the Tao scripture?" Di Lintian smiled. "If it was in the past I definitely would. But no. I'm already a dead person, what else can I think?" Di Ming asked solemnly, "How did our ancestor die?" Di Lintian looked at the horizon. "This is how the world is, there will always be unknown powers." As he spoke he looked at Di Ming. "Tao, I can't care so much anymore. The future generations should focus on improving themselves." As soon as he finished speaking his figure gradually turned illusory, and it wasn't long before he vanished completely. Di Ming opened his palm, revealing a split soul in his hand. It was Di Lintian's. Because they didn't take action there was no consumption. The emperor clan still had a chance to preserve their lives. As if he had thought of something his pupils suddenly shrank. At this moment he suddenly thought of something that everyone had overlooked. When this plainly dressed woman slaughtered her way into the demonic path families, did the demonic path families not summon their ancestors? There must be an ancestor summoning. But the demonic path family still lost a sixth-dimensional self-release realm powerhouse. In other words, the ancestor of the demonic Tao family clan had not been able to stop the plain-dressed woman. If that was the case, Di Ming slowly closed his eyes and moments later he suddenly shouted, "Elder!" As his voice trailed off, an old man appeared beside him. Di Ming said softly, "Go down to the lower realm and contact Yi Xian, see how he is. This concerns the future of the demonic path families. Do not act recklessly." Elder nodded. "Understood." As soon as he finished speaking he left silently. Di Ming looked around, his eyes were filled with worry. Just like what Di Lintian said, someone was messing with the monarch races. Could this person be Yi Xian's man? After the Pope and the others left the monarch races, the Pope and Jiangyu didn't look too good. The two of them wanted to use this chance to annihilate the monarch races. With that, the entire Tao world would be left with only the God Palace, Celestial Pavilion and Tao Village. The Tao Village didn't care about anything. It could be said that the God Palace and Celestial Pavilion were the rulers of the entire Tao world. After devouring the monarch races and the demonic path families, the God Palace and Celestial Pavilion's power would reach a new peak. But what they didn't expect was that Di Ming would be so decisive and use all of the monarch race's trump cards. With that, if they attacked again both sides would suffer. But now they didn't want both sides to suffer because there was something more important, and that was the Tao scripture. The Tao scripture was more important than anything else. Jiangyu suddenly said, "Is someone trying to frame the monarch races?" The Pope said, "Very likely." Just like what Di Ming said, even if that Di Linyuan obtained the Tao scripture he wouldn't have returned so openly. Under normal circumstances he would have gone as far as he could, hidden himself and cultivated the Tao scripture. He wouldn't have returned to the monarch races. But now he has returned so openly. It's highly possible that someone is trying to frame the monarch races, wanting us to have a conflict with the monarch races so that they can reap the benefits. Jiangyu suddenly said, "Could it be the Tao village?" The Tao village. The Pope frowned. He turned to the right side of the sky. One had to admit it was possible. Because in the entire Tao world only the Tao village had such power. Besides, if they were to fight the monarch races, who would benefit the most? The Tao village. The Tao village. The Pope said solemnly, It might be the Dao village, but I can't be sure. Jiang Yu nodded with an ugly expression. If it really was the Dao village, then things would be troublesome. At this moment, a self-release realm expert suddenly said, "Sirs, you seem to have forgotten something." Jiang Yu and the Pope looked at the old man who spoke, and the old man said, "Sirs, Pavilion Master Jiang, the Dao world's spiritual energy is disappearing quickly. If this continues, the Dao world's spiritual energy will dry up in a few decades. Our top priority now is to find that Dao spirit, because the depletion of the entire Dao world's spiritual energy must be related to her." The Pope kept silent. Spiritual energy depletion. It wouldn't affect them in the short term, but the Dao world would only get weaker in the long run. What did people rely on to cultivate? Spiritual energy, of course. Without enough spiritual energy, cultivation would be affected. If this continued, the younger generation of the Dao world would be much weaker than they were now. Jiang Yu suddenly said, "Why did the Dao spirit disappear?" The old man shook his head. "I don't know. In short, after the Dao scripture appeared, I feel that someone is targeting the Dao world. It's best for the two of you to be on guard and not let outsiders take advantage of it." The Pope nodded. "I will send people to investigate this matter." With that, he looked down and said softly, "I wonder how the lower realm is doing. Is the Dao scripture in Yixian's hands?" Dao scripture. Behind them, the old man sighed inwardly. He knew that the Dao scripture was the most important to the Pope and the Pope. That was true, it was an existence that could help them break through. But he suddenly realized that the Dao world was in chaos. The major forces were killing each other, suspecting each other, and the Dao spirit had disappeared. Could be said that the Dao world was in a terrible situation. But everyone was still thinking about the Dao scripture. Dao scripture. The old man shook his head and sighed. Lower realm. Li Mian and the others still couldn't find the fifth dimension Tendo, so they stopped searching. On this day, 6 self-release realm experts arrived in the starry sky. Li Mian looked down at Shaman City. Meanwhile, a young man appeared in front of them. It was Yixian. And Lanxiu and the other women were by Yixian's side. Yixian looked at Li Mian and smiled. "What are all of you doing?" Li Mian smiled. "Young Master Yi, don't play any tricks with us this time. Just one word, hand over the Dao scripture and we'll leave." Yixian spoke in a low voice. "It's at the ancient temple." Li Mian shook his head. "Young Master Yi, I'm truly speechless. The thickness of your skin really exceeds the old man's expectations." Everyone was speechless. Meanwhile, an old monk suddenly appeared. It was the old monk from the ancient temple. Behind the old monk were 3 other monks in black robes. The 3 of them pressed their palms together and restrained their auras. They were like the vast starry sky, and they emanated an invisible pressure. When they saw them, not only did Yixian and the others have solemn expressions, even Li Mian and the others had solemn expressions. All 3 of them were at the upper stage of the self-release realm. Was the ancient temple so strong? At this moment, the old monk suddenly looked at Yixian. "Young Master Yi, there is a Buddhist scripture from my ancient temple in the study room. Young Master Yi, please return it." Yixian said seriously, "Didn't you take it already?" The old monk chanted, "Young Master Yi, this old monk begs you to be a good person. Don't frame my ancient temple. If there's any problem, we can solve it with our fists. I'm really speechless by your slander." Everyone was speechless. Li Mian also looked at Yixian. "Yixian, forgive me for speaking bluntly. The current you has no chance of winning. If you hand over the Dao scripture and we leave, your 5th dimension will be safe for a lifetime." The old monk quickly said, "If young Master Yi is willing to hand it over, my ancient temple will immediately leave and never step into the 5th dimension." In fact, he did not want to risk his life against Yixian because the karma on Yixian was too great. However, there was no other way. The study room was too important to the ancient temple. The 2 things inside were things that the ancient temple would not give up no matter what. Yixian was silent. Li Mian said again, "Young Master Yi, forgive me for speaking bluntly. The current you has no chance of winning. If you resist, not only will you die, but the people behind you will also be buried with you. A single mistake on your part will determine the life and death of the 5th dimension. Therefore please think carefully." Yixian smiled and said, "I've thought about it a long time ago." Li Mian looked at Yixian. Yixian smiled and said, "Look, you came to steal my things, yet you still put on such a benevolent attitude. Yi Xian will tell you today, even if I throw this study room into the cesspool, I will not give it to you. After saying that, he pointed the executing heaven sword at Li Mian and the others. I only have one sentence to say: life and death are indifferent. If you are not happy, then fight. Chapter 12:26. Fight. This was Yi Xian's attitude. In the starry sky, the old monk sighed. He looked at the distant Li Mian. Li Mian smiled. Young Master Ye's courage is praiseworthy, but he's a bit stupid. Kill. After saying this, the 4 self-release realm experts behind him charged down from the starry sky. There was still one who didn't attack. His mission was to defend against the 5th dimension Tendo. The 4 self-release realm experts charged down together. At this moment, the entire starry sky boiled. 4 self-release realm experts. Beside Yi Xian, 7 looked at Xianxia. You and I will work together. Xianxia nodded. The next moment, the 2 women charged into the sky. The 2 of them charged at one of the self-release realm experts. Although the 2 women were monsters, it was still a bit difficult for them to fight one-on-one. After all, the difference in cultivation was too great. But 2 against 1 was not a big problem. In next to no time, the 2 women obstructed a self-release realm expert. At the beginning, that self-release realm expert wanted to quickly kill Xianxia and the other, but he quickly noticed that the 2 of them weren't as weak as he thought. He didn't dare underestimate them. At this moment, the other 3 self-release realm experts had already arrived above Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian didn't attack. 28 experts suddenly appeared in front of the 3. All the half-step self-release realm experts of the 5th dimension. This was Guan Yin's intention. He wanted these half-step self-release realm experts to fight with those self-release realm experts to temper themselves. Perhaps there might be unexpected gains that would allow them to reach self-release realm. There was still a huge difference between half-step self-release realm and self-release realm experts. It was also because of this that Guan Yin wanted all the half-step self-release realm experts to attack together. 28 against 3. Yi Xian and Guan Yin were a bit nervous, but they had no choice. If these half-step self-release realm experts wanted to improve, the best way was to fight self-release realm experts. Soon everyone began to fight. What surprised Yi Xian and Guan Yin was that the 26 people actually blocked those 3 self-release realm experts. Moreover, they weren't at a disadvantage, both sides were evenly matched. Yi Xian and Guan Yin exchanged glances. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, "The 3 of them aren't that good." Yi Xian nodded. He looked at the old monk and the others in the distance. If these 28 people were to go against the person behind the old monk, they would not stand a chance. In the starry sky, Li Mian and Mo Dao's expressions were somewhat gloomy. The 2 of them had never expected that their own people would be blocked by the half-step self-release realm experts of the 5th dimension. At this moment, the old monk suddenly said, "For these people to be able to reach half-step void realm in such an environment, it's extraordinary in itself." Li Mian looked at the old monk. "Master, can you make your move now?" The old monk nodded. Behind him, the 3 monks suddenly disappeared. He disappeared without any warning. When the 3 of them appeared, they were already above Yi Xian and the others. And at this moment, 4 women suddenly appeared in front of them. Audiobook Situ the Azura and the one-legged woman. Audiobook took out the wine gourd at her waist and took a huge gulp. Then she looked at one of the monks. "Come." After saying that, she suddenly turned into a sword light and shot out. The sword light streaked across the starry sky, causing the world to lose color. The monk put his palms together, his expression not changing at all. He took a step forward and sent out a palm. Boom. In the starry sky, the sword light was forced to stop 1,000 feet in front of him. But in the next moment, the sword light suddenly shattered. Then a sword arrived in front of the monk. The monk slowly closed his eyes. Audiobook's sword pierced through empty air. At some point, the monk was already at her original position. Audiobook did not turn around. She slashed her sword to the right and took another gulp from the wine gourd at her waist. At this moment, a powerful force attacked her from behind. Audiobook put down the wine gourd, turned around and stabbed out with her sword. When this sword came out, the entire world seemed to slow down. Sword sense to the limit. In the starry sky, the old monk suddenly frowned. This was a sign that his sword sense had reached the limit. Down below, Yi Xian stared at Audiobook's sword. Sword sense to the limit. This sword strike made him want to draw his sword as well. This cheap senior sister was stronger than he had imagined. In the starry sky, as Audiobook stabbed out with her sword, the powerful force in front of her shattered. Along with it, the space in front of her also shattered. Boom! A sword light flashed, and a figure frantically retreated hundreds of thousands of feet. It was the monk who had been fighting Audiobook. The moment the monk stopped, blood spurted out from the back of his right shoulder. That sword had pierced through his right hand. However, there was still no expression on the monk's face. In the starry sky, Li Mian stared at Audiobook. This woman was only at the half-step self-release realm, but she could fight a first-release realm expert. Furthermore, she had such a huge advantage. Were there so many monstrous geniuses in the fifth dimension? Audiobook took out the wine gourd and took a gulp. Then she looked at the monk 100,000 feet away. Continue. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure turned illusory. In an instant, numerous afterimages flickered through that expanse of space. He was fast to the limit. The monk pressed his palms together and started chanting silently. It didn't take long for pages of golden scriptures to appear around him. After these scriptures appeared, an enormous and ancient golden Buddha suddenly appeared behind him. Along with the appearance of this ancient golden Buddha statue, everyone present felt an extremely powerful pressure. Some half-step self-release realm experts even felt like their chests were blocked, and they were unable to breathe. Down below, Zhou Xian felt this invisible pressure as well. He waved his right hand and the pressure was blocked by his sword intent. Zhou Xian looked at the monk. The monk suddenly raised his head and looked in front of him. The ray of sword light had already arrived. He suddenly made a light gesture with his right hand. In an instant, the giant Buddha statue behind him exploded with a beam of golden light. Then a giant golden palm print blasted on the ray of sword light. Rumble! The sword light instantly shattered. Audiobook was blasted back to where she stood earlier, and the space in front of her and the monk had been transformed into nothingness. Both of them were within a spatial black hole, but the golden Buddha was still there. The monk looked at Audiobook and pressed his palms together. The enormous golden Buddha behind him pressed its palms together as well. In an instant, a powerful pressure swept through the surroundings like a storm and smashed down towards Audiobook. He was trying to suppress her. Audio's expression was calm. She waved her right hand and then the sword in her hand flew out and floated in front of her. Bang! A strand of formidable sword insight surged out from within the sword sect, and it forcefully blocked the formidable pressure from Xianxia. Two powerful pressures collided incessantly in midair, and the starry sky and the surroundings started to fluctuate violently like boiling water. Meanwhile, Audiobook suddenly gazed at Situ and the others. All of you fight. Don't worry about us. As soon as she finished speaking, she took a mouthful of wine, picked up the sword in front of her and charged forward. The monk who stood in front of Audiobook vanished on the spot as well. It didn't take long for the sounds of intense battle to resound from afar. Right at this moment, the remaining two monks above Zhou Xian's group gazed at Situ, Arrow, and the one-legged woman. Situ suddenly said, "I'll fight one of them." As soon as she finished speaking, she gestured with her right hand, and a saber suddenly flew out from nowhere. In the next moment she'd appeared in front of one of the monks along with her saber, and a single swing of her saber shook the heavens and the earth. The monk that Situ had chosen suddenly clenched his fists tightly, and then he smashed them forward. It was a head-on collision. Rumble! With two punches, two huge golden fist prints swept down from the sky. A wisp of disdain flashed through Situ's eyes as she swung her saber. Bang! At the instant that she swung her saber, the two golden fists were instantly transformed into nothingness. At the same time, Situ suddenly appeared in front of the monk with her saber in hand, and then she slashed down with her saber. This strike was soundless and didn't emit any saber chi, but everyone felt a sense of danger. In front of everyone's eyes, the monk suddenly raised his arms to block the attack. He blocked the saber with his arms. Bang! As the saber descended, the space around Situ and the monk shattered into nothingness. However, the monk forcefully withstood the saber. Situ's shocking saber had only sliced through the monk's sleeve. After the clothes were torn, everyone realized that the monk's arms were covered in golden runes. These golden runes emitted a powerful force, and it was this force that had forcefully blocked Situ's saber. Situ slashed down with her saber again after her first strike failed. Bang! This time the saber directly forced the monk to retreat 1,000 feet away. After the monk stopped, he looked at Situ. "Miss, your saber technique is so sharp." Situ grinned. "Then I'll take another strike." As soon as she finished speaking, she took a step forward. When her step landed, she was already in front of the monk. This time the monk didn't forcefully resist Situ's saber. Instead, he punched Situ's abdomen. Obviously, he wanted to exchange injury for injury. At this moment, Situ suddenly became illusory. Several saber lights suddenly streaked past the monk, and the sound of something tearing resounded. When everyone regained their senses, Situ had already returned to her original position. What a fast saber! This was the thought of everyone present. In the starry sky, the old monk looked at Situ with a solemn expression. How could there be so many monsters in the fifth dimension? What was going on? Li Mian and the other person's expressions became more and more unsightly. They hadn't expected that there would be so many experts in the fifth dimension. This was completely different from the fifth dimension they had imagined. These guys could all challenge those at a higher level. In fact, they had overlooked one point. Xian had gathered all the experts in the fifth dimension. Almost all the monsters who could challenge those at a higher level had been gathered here. If the Tao world and the ancient temple could do this, then the fifth dimension would definitely not be their opponent. Simply put, the fifth dimension was more united than the Tao world. Below, although the monk had been slashed 4 times by Situ, his body had unexpectedly withstood these 4 strikes. Moreover, he had only suffered some superficial wounds. It didn't take long for the two of them to start fighting again. On the other side, the last monk looked at Arrow and the one-legged woman. Arrow and the one-legged woman didn't waste any words and directly charged out. At this moment, the old monk suddenly appeared not far away from Xian. The old monk looked at Xian and said, "Young Master Yi, why don't we have a spar?" Xian's eyelids twitched and then he said, "You have the nerve to say that. Master, there's a difference of a few realms between us. Why don't you lower your realm and fight me?" The old monk looked at Xian and said, "Young Master Yi, you have the nerve to say that? We seem to be fighting to the death, right?" Xian said, "You said it was a spar." The old monk was silent for a moment and then he said, "I'm sorry, this old monk has underestimated young Master Yi's shamelessness. Young Master Yi, let's not spar, let's fight to the death." Xian. P.S. I want to take a picture and attract some fans. Chapter 1227. At that moment the old monk finally understood. He could not treat this young Master Yi with common sense. Xian smiled. "You're really thick-skinned to spar with me at this realm." The old monk pressed his palms together. "Young Master Yi, this old monk will ask you one last time. Are you willing to hand over the study house?" Xian shook his head. "No." The old monk nodded. "I understand." With that said, he took a step forward. Behind him, a golden light shone brightly. At that moment, everyone's expression changed drastically. Jiao and Situ's voices rang in Xian's mind at the same time. "Be careful. Careful." There was a solemn tone in the voice. The old monk looked at Xian. He did not make a move, but an invisible pressure pressed towards Xian. There was an extremely solemn voice in the pressure. "Put down the butcher's knife and you will immediately become a Buddha. Put down the butcher's knife and you will immediately become a Buddha." The voice had a penetrating power that struck straight into one's heart, making one revere it. Beside Xian, Guan Yin frowned slightly. At that moment she actually had the thought of not resisting. Guan Yin hurriedly hid behind Xian. Xian took a step forward and a sword intent reverberated from the sword in his hand. However, the sword intent only blocked the pressure but not the voice. The voice was like a sharp sword that pierced into Xian's mind. At that moment Xian's mind was filled with that voice. Xian suddenly smiled. "Put down the butcher's knife? Put down the butcher's knife and I will die faster." As soon as he finished speaking, the voice suddenly disappeared without a trace. The old monk looked at Xian and did not say a word. He had just used a divine power from the ancient temple called Words of Condemnation. However, he had underestimated Xian's sword Dao innate heart. How could a powerful swordsman's heart be so easily shaken? As far as Xian was concerned, his mental state was invulnerable. The old monk pressed his palms together and said softly, "I've still underestimated young Master Yi. Yi Xian looked at the old monk and smiled. Master, can I ask you something? The old monk nodded. Young Master Yi, please speak. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Do you people outside of this world have compassion in your hearts? The old monk looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, we have a compassionate heart, but we do not have a compassionate heart towards everyone. A compassionate heart is for a compassionate person, and young Master Yi is not a compassionate person. Yi Xian smiled. Let me boast a little. What I'm doing now, isn't it a compassionate thing? The old monk nodded. What young Master Yi is doing is a compassionate thing to the living beings in this universe. However, to the universe itself, it is not a compassionate thing. Yi Xian smiled and said, Master, does your ancient temple care about the universe or the common people? Or should I say, do you care about the universe or the common people? The old monk was silent. Yi Xian continued, if you care about the universe, Master, having cultivated to this level, the destruction you can cause to the universe is comparable to millions of people. If you care about the common people, is it a compassionate thing for Master to kill people here today? The old monk looked at Yi Xian. If almsgiver Yi truly cares about the common people, then all the more you should hand over that study room. As long as that study room is handed over, this old monk will immediately return to the sixth dimension. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Master, you see, your goal is to snatch that study room. Whether you talk about compassion or not, it all depends on whether the other party's actions are in line with Master's interests. If it is, then you talk about compassion. If it isn't, then Master's compassion will change your words. As he said that, he shook his head and smiled again. Master, just now you told me to put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. I have something to ask, Master. I, Yi Xian, have never taken the initiative to raise the butcher's knife. How do you want me to put it down? At this moment, Master has brought 3 super experts to the 5th dimension to take my life. It was Master who raised the butcher's knife first. If I say put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha, it should be Master. The old monk stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. At this moment, Li Mian, who was not far away, hurriedly said, Master, he is ruining your state of mind. The old monk nodded. I know. Below, Yi Xian smiled. Ruining your state of mind, Master? Great Master, ask yourself honestly, could it be that what I said was wrong? The old monk looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, this old monk's state of mind is not something that can be ruined with just a few words. Yi Xian spread his hands. Then Master should admit that you are here to snatch the study room. In Master's heart, the so-called interests surpass everything. The old monk looked at Yi Xian and did not say a word. In the sky, Li Mian frowned. Was there something wrong with this old monk? Why did he have to talk about this with Yi Xian? Below, old Li's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Alliance Leader Yi, please delay for another 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, the array can be activated at any time. 15 minutes. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Damn, this old monk was not easy to fool. At this moment, the old monk suddenly smiled. Young Master Yi, have you ever thought that if you hand over the study room, it will be an act of mercy? If you hand over the study room, my ancient temple and the Tao world will retreat. Many fewer people in the 5th dimension will die, right? Hand over the study room. Yi Xian looked at the old monk and said with a smile, Why are you so outstanding, Master? Even if you want to snatch something, you have to say that it is for the good of others. The old monk shook his head. It looks like there is nothing more to be said between this old monk and young Master Yi. With that said, he pressed his palms together and a powerful aura suddenly overflowed from his body. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched as he hurriedly said, Master, I have one last thing to say. The old monk looked at Yi Xian. What? In the sky, the corners of Li Mian's mouth twitched. At this moment he wanted to beat this old monk to death. Are you too naive or too stupid? It was obvious that Yi Xian was stalling for time. Yi Xian suddenly said, Master, I heard that the prophet came from the ancient temple. The old monk nodded. Yes. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, What did he do in the ancient temple? The old monk was about to speak when Li Mian suddenly said coldly, Master, can't you tell that he is stalling for time? The old monk looked at Yi Xian and did not say a word. Yi Xian said with a smile, Master, you know that I am stalling for time, right? The old monk nodded. I know. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Then why does Master want me to stall for time? The old monk pressed his palms together. Because this old monk also needs some time. Upon hearing that, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Don't tell me that you are still calling for help. The old monk smiled. Young master, you guessed correctly. With that said, two old men in red monk robes suddenly appeared in the space behind him. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they saw these two people. Both of them were at the upper self-release realm. Even Li Mian and the old monk were shocked. There are so many experts in this ancient temple. The old monk looked at Yi Xian. I presume that young Master Yi has prepared his trump card. Right? Smiling, Yi Xian said, yes. The old monk pressed his palms together. Then let us experience it. Yi Xian turned around. Meanwhile, a voice resounded from below. Activate the formation. The formation. As soon as the voice resounded, the entire starry sky trembled violently. After that, an enormous formation appeared behind Yi Xian, and it covered the entire starry sky. On the other hand, Yi Xian appeared at the core of the formation. He held the executing heaven sword in his hand. Endless energy converged towards him from all around him. Besides that, there was also the energy of countless stars. But upon seeing this, Li Mian and the other man's expressions immediately changed. They'd experienced this formation in the past, and Yi Xian's attack had almost killed them. Moreover, the formation seemed to have grown even stronger. The old monk gazed at Yi Xian with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Yi Xian gazed at the old monk and smiled. Master, didn't you want to spar? We can spar now. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't waste his breath and slashed with his sword. Wasting his breath now would be a waste of time. Sword light tore through the starry sky and the world dimmed. Needless to say, the might of Yi Xian's attack was even stronger than Audio's attack from before. Although Audio's sword was powerful, she was ultimately a human. As for Yi Xian, he had gathered the power of the formation and the power of the stars. This slash was not something an ordinary self-release realm expert could block. At this moment, the old monk suddenly took a step forward. With that step, a beam of Buddhist light suddenly appeared behind him. Immediately after, a huge golden Buddha statue appeared in the depths of the starry sky. The moment the golden Buddha statue appeared, a powerful pressure swept down from the depths of the starry sky like the sky was collapsing. At the same time, the old monk suddenly punched out. The moment the old monk punched out, the Buddha statue behind him suddenly opened its eyes and punched out. The power of the punch caused the starry sky to tremble. Under everyone's gaze, the Buddha statue's punch landed on Yi Xian's sword light. The sword light trembled violently and shattered, and the golden fist continued to descend. At this moment, the array formation that Yi Xian was in trembled violently, as if it could not withstand this power. Within the array formation, Yi Xian suddenly grinned. He took a step forward, and with each step a domain appeared. Sword domain. After the sword domain appeared, it covered the entire array formation, stabilizing it. Immediately after, Yi Xian took another step forward, and with this step he stabbed out with his sword. Using the sword as thought. At this moment he was thinking about the people behind him. Yi Xian will protect this five-dimensional universe. Thought of guardian. With a stab of the sword, a beam of sword light soared into the sky. Under everyone's gaze, the beam of sword light slashed at the golden fist. Boom. The golden fist exploded, and the beam of sword light soared into the sky, slashing at the golden Buddha statue. In the starry sky, the old monk put his palms together, and the Buddha statue behind him also put its palms together. In an instant, a golden light appeared before the beam of sword light. This golden light forcefully blocked Yi Xian's sword light, but the sword light was suppressing it. At this moment, Li Mian suddenly said, "Attack." The moment he said that, Mo Dao, who was beside him, suddenly opened his palm. The next moment, a small black bell appeared in his hand. The Immortal Pavilion's supreme treasure, the Immortal Dao Bell. The Immortal Dao Bell, the Immortal Pavilion's supreme treasure. When the bell rings, people die. Mo Dao suddenly chanted an incantation. Soon, the Immortal Dao Bell in his hand trembled violently. Then the sound of the bell echoed throughout the entire five-dimensional universe. The sound of the bell was deafening for countless people, and they bled from their orifices. Below, within the array formation, Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. Then the space behind him suddenly split open, and a strange force slashed at him like a sharp sword as fast as lightning. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared behind Yi Xian. The person who appeared was Zhang Wenxiu. Seeing this, Yi Xian was horrified and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Wenxiu, my body can block it. Quickly dodge, don't do anything stupid for me. Everyone knew that Yi Xian might be able to block it, but even if he didn't die he would be crippled. Zhang Wenxiu tightly gripped the spear in his hand, not retreating even half a step. Unafraid of death. Chapter 12:28. The Celestial Dao Bell. This was the Celestial Pavilion's supreme treasure, and it was one of the top treasures in the entire Dao world. In the ancient Dao world there was a saying, when the bell rings, people die. At this moment, a self-release realm expert activated the Celestial Dao Bell. Just how terrifying was its power. This was not something that Zhang Wenxiu could block. Yi Xian was very clear about this, so he did not even think about withdrawing his sword. The moment he did so, the Buddhist light in the sky broke through his sword light and swept down. Withdrawing the sword. Withdrawing the sword was withdrawing its aura. In an instant, Yi Xian's aura was directly suppressed by the old monk and the golden Buddha statue. However, Yi Xian did not care about this. Yi Xian directly turned around and pulled Zhang Wenxiu behind him. At this moment, a mysterious power directly slashed his body. Boom. Yi Xian and Zhang Wenxiu both retreated nearly 10,000 feet. After the two of them stopped, blood flowed out of the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. Behind him, Zhang Wenxiu's face was pale without a trace of blood. Although Yi Xian had blocked most of the power, a small part of it still penetrated into her body. Even a small portion of the power was difficult for her to block. In the starry sky, Missouri Dao frowned. How is this possible? There was a trace of disbelief in his voice. This was the Celestial Dao Bell. Its power was enough to instantly kill a self-release realm expert. And yet Yi Xian had blocked it. Soon he discovered something. Yi Xian had an armor. Human Emperor armor. Below, Yi Xian took a deep breath. This time, without the Human Emperor armor, he would have died without a doubt. He found that his body could not block that bird bell. Even though the Human Emperor armor blocked most of the power, his body still suffered a certain degree of damage. At this time, the golden light had arrived above his and Zhang Wenxiu's heads. Yi Xian turned to look at Zhang Wenxiu. I don't want anyone else to die for me. Zhang Wenxiu stared at Yi Xian. We agreed to live and die together. Yi Xian roared, I'll die first. Before I die, you can't die. Do you understand? Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and said nothing. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and a trace of hostility flashed in his eyes. Gather. As soon as he finished speaking, the matrix trembled violently. Boundless power instantly gathered around him, and in the next moment he slashed with his sword. The sword slashed at the golden light. Boom. The golden light instantly shattered. But at this moment, the old monk appeared in front of him out of nowhere. The old monk threw a punch. With this punch, the space in front of Yi Xian caved in. At the same time, the matrix around him became illusory. Below, Old Man Li stared at this scene and muttered, Still not enough. Still not enough. In the starry sky, Yi Xian did not dodge the punch, nor could he stomp. Facing the old monk's punch, he could only take it head-on. Yi Xian stabbed with his sword. This sword went straight for the old monk's throat. However, the moment the sword stabbed out, he was directly suppressed by the old monk's punch, and the sword could not move forward. Yi Xian suddenly roared and 3 domains suddenly appeared. Sword domain, blood domain and death domain. As soon as the 3 domains appeared, the old monk's calm face instantly turned solemn. In the next moment, boom. Under everyone's gaze, the old monk was directly pushed back hundreds of feet by Yi Xian's sword. 3 domains. In the starry sky, Li Mian and Old Li stared at Yi Xian. What kind of monster was this? He actually had 3 domains. Domain. It was already extremely rare for an ordinary person to comprehend 1 domain. But this Yi Xian actually comprehended 3 domains. What the hell was this? Li Mian and Old Li's hearts were tumbling like a storm. Opposite Yi Xian, the old monk looked at Yi Xian with a trace of shock in his eyes. 3 domains. There were not many people in the ancient temple, but there were many monstrous geniuses. Over the years he had seen many monstrous geniuses, but this Yi Xian still surprised him. It was worth mentioning that Yi Xian did not use the matrix for that sword. The old monk put his palms together and said softly, "Young Master Yi, you really surprised me. In the beginning I thought the most terrifying was the person behind young Master Yi. Little did I know that young Master Yi himself is also very terrifying. If young Master Yi reaches self-release, I'm afraid no one here is a match for young Master Yi." Li Mian and Mo Dao were silent, because they knew that the old monk was right. If Yi Xian reached self-release, no one here would be a match for Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not speak. He looked around. Currently, the fifth dimension's side was not at a disadvantage. Moreover, Audiobook and Situ were already suppressing the two monks. However, there were still two people behind the old monk who had not made a move. It was the two monks dressed in red robes. They were both at the upper self-release realm. If they made a move, the situation would instantly change. What were they going to do? Yi Xian was silent. At this time, Zhang Wenxiu appeared beside Yi Xian. Yi Xian grabbed Zhang Wenxiu's hand and said softly, "Promise me before I die, you are not allowed to die." He was really afraid that someone would die for him, Yi Xian. The dead were dead, but the living would live in guilt for the rest of their lives. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. At this time the old monk suddenly said, "Attack." After saying that, the two monks behind him disappeared on the spot. Clearly he was very clear that it would be difficult for him to kill Yi Xian alone, and Li Mian and Mo Dao had to guard against the Tendo of the fifth dimension. Therefore, if they wanted to quickly kill Yi Xian, they could only gang up on him. Seeing the three rushing over, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Wenxiu, retreat. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at Yi Xian, did not speak and retreated. On the other side, a woman watched the scene in front of her quietly. It was Qianmo. However, she had no intention of making a move. Below, Yi Xian lifted his head and looked at the old monk and the other two who were charging at him. He said with a smile, "They really think highly of me." With that, he opened his palm and the executing heaven sword disappeared. Then an illusory Xiaota appeared between his brows. Prison Pagoda. The moment the prison pagoda appeared, the old monk's expression changed and he instinctively slowed down. At this time, a voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind, "Return." In an instant, all the Tao laws returned, and then the prison pagoda above Yi Xian's head lit up. 9 different colors of light. Seeing this, the old monk's expression changed, "Retreat." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Imprison." As soon as he finished speaking, 2 blood-red words, "prisoner," suddenly appeared above the heads of the 2 red-clothed monks who had rushed up to Yi Xian. As soon as the 2 words appeared, 2 mysterious forces locked the 2 red-clothed monks. Their expressions changed drastically and they wanted to resist. However, they noticed to their astonishment that the 2 forces had sealed their cultivations. They exchanged glances, clenched their right hands into fists and then smashed forward. Their bodies were forcefully broken. However, the 2 blood-red imprisoned characters still locked onto them. At this moment, both of them were horrified. What sort of force could actually seal their cultivations? After all, both of them were at the high self-release realm. At this moment, the old monk in the distance suddenly attacked. In the starry sky behind him, a huge golden Buddha suddenly punched out. With a punch, a 10,000-meter-long fist mark swooped down from the starry sky. The powerful fist force shook the starry sky. And at this moment, Yi Xian, who was below, suddenly raised his head, and a trace of hostility flashed in his eyes. Within the prison pagoda, a dazzling beam of light suddenly erupted from the first level. This beam of light directly shot up into the sky, and the moment the fist came into contact with this beam of light, it vanished into thin air. Immediately after, the beam of light directly blasted the golden Buddha statue in the starry sky. Bang! The golden Buddha statue disappeared without a trace. It was directly obliterated. The old monk's eyes were filled with disbelief when he witnessed this scene. What sort of force is that? Li Mian and Mo Dao had disbelief on their faces as well. They'd sensed the aura of death from that ray of light just now. What's that Xiao? Both of them stared fixedly at the Xiaota above Yi Xian. At this moment, the old monk suddenly looked in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, the bodies of the 2 red-robed monks were growing more and more illusory. Both of them were imprisoned within them and couldn't move at all. The 2 red-robed monks exchanged glances, and then they sat down cross-legged on the ground, pressed their palms together and began to silently chant scriptures. They didn't resist, because it was useless. The two prisoner characters above their heads contained a great Tao that far surpassed the two of them. The two of them could not break through it at all, especially when their cultivations were sealed. They were waiting for death. Both of them were very calm in the face of death. Xian gazed at the two monks in front of him. At this moment his expression was unsightly because he'd consumed too much energy. After the Tao laws of the prison pagoda were activated, its might was tremendous, but it consumed a great deal of energy as well. At this moment he felt something within his body rapidly flowing away. Lifespan. Meanwhile, Big Sister's voice resounded in Xian's mind. Your lifespan is rapidly decreasing, so it's best that you stop. Otherwise you'll die in an hour at most. An hour. Xian slowly closed his eyes and smiled bitterly. There was a powerful godly item that had gathered all the Tao laws with great difficulty, but he had to pay the price with his lifespan. Wasn't it too tragic for him? Without much thought, Xian waved his right hand, and the two red-robed monks were directly sent into the prison pagoda by Xian. Although the two monks were extremely powerful, he was still at ease with Big Sister suppressing them together. And he hurriedly put away the prison pagoda. This really consumed too much energy. Not only did it consume his lifespan, but it also consumed his mental strength and soul power. As for his Xianqi, there was no need to even mention it. In that short period of time, it had almost drained all of his Xianqi. Xian looked at the old monk in the distance. Come, continue. Right now he wanted to rest. However, he couldn't show weakness. Once he showed weakness, the other party would definitely not let it go. The old monk looked at Xian for a moment, then opened his palm. Come. As his voice fell in the distant ancient temple, a black light suddenly shot into the sky. The next moment, that black light directly passed through the barrier of the universe and flew towards the starry sky of the fifth dimension. Below, Big Sister's voice suddenly resounded in Xian's mind. A godly item has descended into the fifth dimension. P.S. Thank you to those who voted recently. Thank you everyone for your support. Chapter 1229. A divine object descending into the fifth dimension. Xian frowned. Clearly, the old monk saw that he was in a weak state and did not want to give up. This was a bit troublesome. Xian asked in his heart, Big Sister, can I still use the prison pagoda? Big Sister said, yes. However, I'm afraid your lifespan is about to run out. Therefore, I don't recommend you use the prison pagoda again. Xian was silent. If he did not use the prison pagoda, how could he fight against the ancient temple and the Tao realm? Now he had to stop the old monk and the divine object that was about to arrive. Otherwise, everyone would die. Perhaps the ancient temple would not slaughter the experts of the fifth dimension, but the Tao realm would. He could never place his hopes on the mercy of the enemy. Xian slowly closed his eyes. This time no one would help him. He had to rely on himself. Below, Guan Yin and Wen Xiu looked at Xian. They knew that if Xian could not withstand this, the fifth dimension would instantly collapse. Then the entire fifth dimension would either be slaughtered or enslaved. This battle was related to the fate of the fifth dimension. If he lost, there was no need to wait for the fifth dimension calamity. At this moment, the space above everyone's head suddenly split open. Then a long blade appeared in everyone's line of sight. As soon as the saber appeared, the space it passed through turned into nothingness, before turning into a deathly stillness. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Xian's mind. Buddhist commandment blade. This is one of the 3 great treasures of the ancient temple. This blade is blessed by the Buddhist Dharma of the ancient temple's senior monks. It naturally restrains evil and evil spirits. In addition, this blade has the power of reincarnation. Once you are hit by it, you will immediately enter the reincarnation hell, never to be reincarnated. The power of this object is even above that of the Tendo bell. This was Big Sister's voice. Xian was somewhat puzzled. Big Sister, why do you know so much about the ancient temple's treasures? Big Sister was silent for a moment, then said, Have you forgotten where teacher came from? Hearing this, Xian understood. Back then, Mr. had come out of the ancient temple. Xian looked at the old monk. The old monk opened his palm and the Buddhist commandment blade fell into his hand. The moment he held the blade, the old monk's aura suddenly changed. Previously, the old monk's aura was gentle, but now, the old monk's aura turned into an oppressive one. Furthermore, there was a hint of malice within the oppressive aura. Danger. This was what Yi Xian was feeling at the moment. This old monk was an upper self-release realm expert to begin with. Now that he obtained such a divine item, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. How could he block it? Yi Xian took a deep breath and walked towards the old monk. In fact, his best choice now was to temporarily avoid the brunt of the attack. However, he could not retreat. Once he retreated, everyone present would die. Of course, he still had another choice, and that was to hand over the study. However, if he were to hand over the study room just like that to save his life, it would be better to die than to exchange that method for survival. As long as one was alive, one had to fight for something. Thus Yi Xian chose to fight. Yi Xian walked towards the old monk. He walked very slowly, and in his hand was the Executing Heaven sword. The Executing Heaven sword wasn't his sword, but now, it had actually fused perfectly with him. As if it had sensed its master's fighting spirit, the Executing Heaven sword suddenly trembled violently, and numerous sword hums shook the starry sky. In the starry sky, Li Mian and the other two stared fixedly at Yi Xian. They still hadn't attacked. Their mission was very simple, and that was to stop the fifth dimension Tendo that might attack. As for the fifth dimension Tendo, he wasn't in the fifth dimension at all. In the starry sky of the Tao world, Mu Nianyan was walking slowly with a fish in her hand. Along the way, a voice rang out from beside her. He should be in danger now. Mu Nianyan didn't speak. The voice spoke again. Are you really not going to help? Mu Nianyan suddenly stopped and said softly, I don't have much time left. In my limited time, what I can do is not to help him defeat his opponents, but to let him have the strength to face any difficulties. What he needs is to grow. After saying that, she walked into the distance. The voice suddenly asked, You don't have much time left? What do you mean? Mu Nianyan smiled. Nothing. The voice said, What are you hiding from me? Mu Nianyan chuckled and didn't speak. Soon she disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. In the fifth dimension, Yi Xian was still walking slowly towards the old monk. At this moment he was actually very weak and he couldn't even hide his weakness. The old monk looked at Yi Xian in front of him. He didn't speak anymore and swung his saber. One saber. Just one saber, and everyone's expression changed. That saber slashed out and a dark gray saber aura cut through the starry sky, heading straight for Yi Xian. Wherever the dark gray saber aura passed, space turned into nothingness, spiritual energy collapsed, and everything returned to its origin. This saber directly injured the origin of the fifth dimension. Seeing this saber, Zhang Wenxiu's expression changed drastically. She directly rushed towards Yi Xian. She knew that the current Yi Xian couldn't block this saber. Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss Guan, stop her. As soon as he said that, Guan Yin directly blocked in front of Zhang Wenxiu. Guan Yin looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Believe in him. Believe in him. Zhang Wenxiu clenched her fists and stared at Yi Xian in the distance. At this moment she suddenly realized that she really cared about this man in front of her. When did this start? Zhang Wenxiu was somewhat at a loss. In the distance Yi Xian looked at the saber aura coming towards him. He knew that this time he could only take it on himself. No one could help him. He could only rely on himself. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. At this time the saber aura was already several dozen zhang in front of him. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. Boom. A blood-red light shot out from his body and into the sky. In an instant the entire sky was directly dyed blood-red. Seeing this scene, Li Mian and Mo Dao looked at each other, a trace of shock in their eyes. What kind of bloodline power was this? It was actually so powerful. Mo Dao suddenly said in a low voice, This bloodline is even stronger than the demonic path bloodline and the emperor bloodline. Li Mian nodded. He stared at Yi Xian below. This person's background is extraordinary. I'm afraid there's someone behind him. Generally, people with powerful bloodlines would definitely have someone behind them. The moment Yi Xian activated his bloodline, the Executing Heaven sword in his hand instantly turned into a blood-red sword. The sword changed according to its master. Meanwhile, the saber aura had arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian took a step forward and a sea of blood appeared beneath his foot. Yi Xian slashed with his sword. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light exploded apart. The saber aura was forcefully blocked by Yi Xian's sword. However, Yi Xian's figure trembled violently within the sea of blood. Because he'd merely blocked the saber aura, he hadn't destroyed it. Suddenly, the old monk swung his saber once more. This attack was even stronger than the previous one. A wisp of viciousness flashed through Yi Xian's eyes, and then he suddenly roared furiously. The blood domain appeared, and it was unprecedentedly strong after he activated his bloodline. Yi Xian slashed once more. This attack contained a single thought. He slashed with his sword. Bang! The saber aura in front of Yi Xian was instantly slashed into pieces. However, another saber aura tore through the air and arrived before him. Yi Xian swung his sword horizontally and a blood-red ray of light shot forward. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated almost 3 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped moving, the sound of a bell suddenly resounded in the starry sky above him. The Tendo bell. Mo Dao had attacked again. The strength that Yi Xian had demonstrated scared the two of them. Such a monstrous genius had to be eliminated right now, otherwise he would definitely bring calamity to them in the future. At the instant that the bell resounded, the space above Yi Xian had split apart, and then a strange force tore through space and slashed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian raised his sword and stabbed forward, and a ray of blood-red light flickered on the tip of his sword. Bang! In an instant, a ray of blood-red light erupted. Yi Xian retreated another 3 kilometers, but before he could stop, the old monk suddenly appeared in front of him. The old monk silently recited a scripture, and then he swung his saber down. At the instant that the saber was swung, a strange force flickered on the blade. The power of samsara. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Bang! A ray of blood-red light rippled around Yi Xian as Yi Xian retreated explosively. As he retreated, the old monk appeared in front of him once more, and he slashed down with his saber once more. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot. 3 domains suddenly appeared. At the instant that they appeared, the old monk was directly suppressed, and Yi Xian stabbed forward with his sword. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword was faster than the old monk's saber. Yi Xian's sword was aimed at the old monk's throat, and the old monk's saber was slashing towards Yi Xian's head. It was an internecine situation. The old monk did not retract his saber, and Yi Xian did not retract his sword. Bang! Bang! As 2 earth-shattering explosions rang out, the old monk and Yi Xian retreated frantically. The two of them retreated for a good 10,000 feet. The moment Yi Xian stopped, a cracking sound came from his body. Human King armor. The Human King armor that the old blacksmith had forged for him had cracked. Not only that, but a mysterious force was corroding the Human King armor, and it was disappearing at a visible speed. The power of samsara. The Human King armor actually could not block the power of samsara. In the distance, a golden kasaya had appeared on the old monk's body. It was this golden kasaya that had blocked Yi Xian's sword. The old monk looked at Yi Xian in the distance. He put his palms together and said softly, "Young Master Yi, you have given me too many surprises." He really did not expect that Yi Xian could rely on his own strength to fight him to this point. One had to know that he was several realms higher than Yi Xian. Most importantly, he was holding the Buddhist commandment saber just now. It could be said that with the Buddhist commandment saber, there were few who could match him in the same realm. But this Yi Xian was actually on par with him just now. He knew that it was because of Yi Xian's bloodline. He was shocked by this bloodline. What bloodline was this? It was actually so strong. Without thinking much, the old monk suddenly walked towards Yi Xian with the saber in hand. He walked very quickly and a powerful aura swept across the field. This time, there was nothing that could block Yi Xian's Buddhist commandment saber. This saber would definitely kill Yi Xian. Soon, the saber's momentum was like a flood sweeping the surroundings and the starry sky trembled. Chapter 12:30. It was obvious that the old monk wanted to end Yi Xian with a single slash. The strength that Yi Xian displayed was simply too terrifying. Even the old monk was fearful. Yi Xian was able to block that slash earlier because of Yi Xian's armor. But now Yi Xian didn't have any armor. The old monk was confident in this slash. At that moment, the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into a blood-red sword. The sword left behind by the man in green. Sword spirit. The sword spirit suddenly transformed into a beam of blood-red light that entered the space between Yi Xian's brows. Bang! In an instant, the last bit of rationality in Yi Xian's eyes vanished. He had gone completely mad. Bang! A monstrous bloodline aura shot into the sky and shook the starry sky. There was a world of difference between half-mad and completely mad. After going completely mad, Yi Xian's aura and strength skyrocketed. A powerful aura of malevolence and killing intent swept towards the surroundings. In an instant, the entire starry sky was filled with killing intent and malevolence. At that moment, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. His sword collided with the old monk's saber. Bang! Under everyone's gazes, the old monk instantly retreated 3 kilometers. The blood-red sword light didn't disperse. It was still on the saber. At that moment, a mysterious force suddenly appeared on the saber. The power of Buddhism. It could purify the murderous aura and malevolence. But at that moment, the saber was actually unable to purify the murderous aura and malevolence on the sword energy. It was the murderous aura and malevolence that came from the bloodline. The old monk held the saber with both hands and resisted Yi Xian's blood-red sword energy. Yi Xian was about to attack when the sound of a bell resounded in the distant sky. Tendo bell. Mo Dao had attacked again. Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. In front of him, the strange power was directly shattered by his sword. Mo Dao and Li Mian's expressions changed when they saw that. Yi Xian has become so strong? Suddenly Li Mian said, "It's that sword." Mo Dao looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. This sword was even stronger than the executing heaven sword. Where did Yi Xian get so many divine objects? Below, Yi Xian walked towards the old monk. With every step he took, a bloody light would appear beneath his feet. It was true that every step he took was bloody. Far away, the old monk looked at Yi Xian with a grim expression. Because at that moment, not only did his Buddhist commandment blade fail to purify Yi Xian's killing intent and hostility, but it was almost eroded by Yi Xian's killing intent and hostility. What kind of bloodline power was this? The old monk was even more puzzled. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A blood-red sword light tore through the battlefield. The old monk narrowed his eyes and slashed down. Golden light flashed on the Buddhist commandment blade. As soon as the blade fell, a blood-colored sword chi tore through the air. Bang! The blood-red light and golden light exploded. The old monk instantly retreated hundreds of meters, while Yi Xian retreated hundreds of meters. However, the old monk's expression grew even more solemn. Because he realized that Yi Xian's aura was skyrocketing. Yi Xian was growing stronger and stronger. Most importantly, Yi Xian's body possessed extremely powerful healing abilities. Yi Xian had a huge advantage in a battle of attrition. The old monk looked up at Li Mian and Mo Dao. "Please use your trump cards if you have any." Li Mian and Mo Dao fell silent. In the battlefield, their people had been blocked by Yi Xian's people. Although the two of them hadn't made a move yet, their goal was to resist the fifth dimension's heavenly Tao. At this moment, the old monk suddenly said, "If the 3 of us join forces and can kill him, then that's naturally good. If not, then we'll retreat." Li Mian and Mo Dao exchanged glances and nodded. At this moment, they naturally wouldn't play any tricks. Because at this moment, the death of the old monk from the ancient temple wouldn't benefit them at all. Right now, Yi Xian's threat was even greater. The old monk suddenly charged out with his blade. Around him, rays of golden light surged into his blade. Seeing the old monk attack, Li Mian and Mo Dao didn't hesitate anymore and immediately charged towards Yi Xian. 3 against 1. Although Yi Xian had the support of his bloodline and the sword spirit, he definitely couldn't defeat the 3 people in front of him. In fact, the moment Yi Xian went completely mad, he had already lost half of the battle. Completely mad meant that he had lost his rationality. If no one suppressed him, the greatest threat to the 5th dimension would be him, Yi Xian. Unfortunately, the old monk and the others didn't know this. Otherwise, they would immediately leave. In the starry sky, the 3 super strong people dashed towards Yi Xian. The space where Yi Xian was directly crushed by the 3 strong energies and became illusory. Right at this moment, a woman suddenly appeared before Li Mian and Mo Dao. Who's Qianmo? Li Mian and Mo Dao were slightly stunned when they saw this woman. It didn't take long for Li Mian to say, "Stop her." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged downwards. As for Mo Dao, he charged towards Qian Mo. Qian Mo didn't stop Li Mian. With her current strength, she could only stop a self-release realm expert. It didn't take long for the old monk and Li Mian to arrive in front of Yi Xian. Suddenly, an illusory Xiao Ta appeared between Yi Xian's brows. The old monk and Li Mian's expressions changed drastically when they saw this illusory pagoda, and they didn't hesitate to turn around and retreat. This retreat caused them to retreat over 10 kilometers away. Xiao Ta. Just now, Xiao Ta instantly killed 2 upper self-release realm experts. Not to mention Li Mian, even the old monk was extremely shocked. He was extremely fearful of Yi Xian's Xiao Ta, because he wasn't confident that he could stop Xiao Ta. For a time, the old monk and Li Mian didn't dare move. On the other hand, Yi Xian didn't stop. He didn't charge towards the old monk, and he charged towards the monk who was being suppressed by wine instead. Actually, the monk wasn't a match for wine anymore. However, it was difficult for wine to kill him as well. But now that Yi Xian had joined the battle, the situation had changed. The monk suddenly turned around and a blood-red ray of sword light slashed over. The monk's pupils constricted slightly. He pressed his palms together and a ray of golden light surged out from within him. However, the ray of golden light had just come into contact with Yi Xian's sword light and instantly dispersed. Bang! The monk was pushed back, but right at this moment, another ray of sword light appeared behind him. Whine! The monk's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly turned around and slapped out with his palm. Bang! His palm forcefully blocked Audio's sword, but at this moment, a sword suddenly pierced through the back of his neck. The monk's eyes opened wide and then his body gradually dissipated. Seeing the monk being killed by Yi Xian, the old monk's expression instantly turned gloomy. He stared fixedly at Yi Xian. He suddenly realized that even if the 5th dimension Tendo didn't attack, Yi Xian didn't seem to be easy to kill. Opposite Yi Xian, Wine was also looking at Yi Xian. Her eyes were filled with vigilance because she sensed killing intent from Yi Xian. The current Yi Xian didn't look normal at first glance. Wine looked at Yi Xian. Little junior brother, you wouldn't be thinking of hitting me, right? Yi Xian was just about to attack when the blood-red sword in his hand suddenly trembled. In the next moment, Yi Xian turned around and charged towards the monk in the distance. Wine was slightly stunned when she saw this scene, and then she said softly, "The sword is guiding." The old monk noticed this as well. In the beginning, he was rather happy when he saw Yi Xian attack Wine because it seemed like Yi Xian's mind wasn't normal and he couldn't distinguish between friend and foe. However, when Yi Xian turned around to kill another monk, he was stunned. The sword is guiding. Although Yi Xian didn't have a mind, the sword in his hand did. The sword was guiding Yi Xian. Motherfucker. The old monk suddenly said, "Retreat. Retreat." When he heard the old monk, the monk in the distance didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and vanished into the starry sky. Zidu was slightly stunned. He fled a little too quickly. The old monk took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian, and then he turned around and left. He knew that he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian now. An expert at the upper self-release realm could suppress Yi Xian, but he couldn't kill Yi Xian and might even lose to Yi Xian, who had gone completely mad. Li Mian and Situin immediately retreated when they saw the old monk and the others leave. It didn't take long for the experts of the ancient temple and the Dao world to leave. Guan Yin and the others instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this scene, but it didn't take long for them to look at Yi Xian. What about Yi Xian? Can he recover his mind? Everyone was looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood in the starry sky with a sword in his right hand while his body trembled incessantly. Boundless evil energy and killing intent were still around him. His aura was still rising madly. It seemed like it was endless and it was extremely shocking. Actually, there was a serious problem, and it was that his aura was rising too quickly, and his body was slightly unable to endure it. After all, his body was already heavily injured when he forcefully utilized the pagoda of prison earlier. Now his bloodline energy was rising madly and his body was actually unable to endure it. The most important problem was that no one here could suppress his bloodline. There was once someone who could, and it was the 5th dimension Tendo. But now the 5th dimension Tendo wasn't here. Meanwhile, Wuxia was about to go over, but he was stopped by a Jew. A Jew shook her head. "It's dangerous." Yi Xian was in an extremely dangerous state right now, and he might attack anyone who approached him. Wuxia gazed at a Jew. Can you suppress his bloodline? Zhou shook her head. No. The bloodline energy within Yi Xian was truly too formidable. Only someone who was much stronger than Yi Xian could possibly suppress the bloodline energy within Yi Xian's body. Zhang Wenxiu gazed at Yi Xian from afar and her eyes were filled with worry. Zhou looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Sir, can you suppress his bloodline? The reason why Yi Xian had gone completely mad was because of this sword. The sword trembled slightly as though it was replying. Zhou frowned slightly. The sword's reply was, yes, she could not suppress Yi Xian's bloodline, but she could make Yi Xian's bloodline even crazier. Zhou gulped down a mouthful of wine and then said, what sword? I submit. At the side, Qianemo looked at Yi Xian and slowly clenched her fists. Right now Yi Xian's bloodline energy was at its strongest, and if she were to dual cultivate with him now. P.S. Brothers, do you have any good movies to recommend? Leave them and I will look through them one by one and then reply. Chapter 1231. At that moment, Qianemo suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian subconsciously wanted to attack, but he was affected by the sword's spirit. Qianemo grabbed Yi Xian's shoulder with her right hand. In the next moment she and Yi Xian disappeared from the scene. The expressions of Zhang Wenxiu and Lan Xiu and the others instantly changed, and they were about to pursue her when Zhou said abruptly, she won't harm her and we can't harm her. The current Yi Xian wasn't someone Qianemo could fight against. If Qianemo harbored evil thoughts towards Yi Xian, that sword would protect Yi Xian. As long as that sword didn't affect Yi Xian, two Qianmos wouldn't be able to do anything to Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Guan Yin suddenly appeared before Elderly. Elderly remained silent. Guan Yin looked at Elderly. Strengthen the array formation at all costs. Elderly nodded. Understood. The array from before was very powerful. However, it was still not enough against a super expert like the old monk. If not for Yi Xian having the world prison pagoda, the fifth dimension would have already been defeated. Elderly turned around and left. He had already seen the flaws in the array formation. What he needed to do now was to strengthen the formation at all costs. Because Yi Xian was strong enough. There was no need to worry about whether Yi Xian could withstand it or not. What they had to worry about now was whether the formation was strong enough. Guan Yin looked at the half-step self-release realm experts around him. Just now, when the 28 half-step self-release realm experts were fighting against the self-release realm experts, these 28 people had actually suppressed their opponents. From this, it could be seen that the difference between half-step escape 1 and upper escape 1 was not especially big. Of course, she was very clearly aware that that was only when facing an ordinary self-release realm expert. If she faced someone like the old monk, then she would absolutely not be a match. However, after this battle, those half-step self-release realm powerhouses gains were not small. It was worth mentioning that in this battle, Guan Yin still did not send the sword sex swordsman to fight. This was a sword hidden in the fifth dimension. It had to be used at a critical moment. Guan Yin turned around and left. She now realized that the overall level of the fifth dimension was still not good enough. She still had to speed up. In the battlefield, Zhou looked into the depths of the starry sky and drank. No one knew what she was thinking. At this moment Situ walked to her side and asked, what do you think? Zhou shook her head. It's not a true self-release. Situ nodded. Indeed. The banished immortal island was no ordinary place. An invincible super swordsman once lived there. As the successor of that person, the two of them were much more knowledgeable than ordinary people. Zhou continued, looks like the sixth dimension and the Dao world aren't the limit. Situ looked at Zhou and did not speak. Wine suddenly turned to look at Arrow in the distance. You're still missing one thing. Situ also looked at Arrow. It could be said that apart from the two of them, Arrow's strength was the most terrifying. Arrow looked at Zhou who said, follow me. With that she turned around and left. Arrow did not reject. He followed. Her talent and strength were top-notch, but most of the time talent alone was not enough. He also needed a bit of luck. Situ suddenly pointed at Seven in the distance. Zhou looked at Seven and shook her head. I can't. Seven. In terms of talent, no one here could compare to Seven. He was a true monster. Her current sword path attainments were actually not lower than Zhou's, but her realm was a little weaker. One could say that if Seven reached half a step self-release, Even Audiobook might not be able to beat her. 7 looked at Audiobook and Arrow and did not say a word. Below, and Lanxiao and Zhang Wenxiao did not leave. The two of them were still worried about Zhou Xian. 7 suddenly said, "That sword is very strong." The two of them looked at 7 and she said softly, "That woman can't hurt him, don't worry." With that she turned around and left. As a swordsman she could feel how strong the sword in Zhou Xian's hand was. And Lanxiao and Zhang Wenxiao looked at each other and then the two of them turned around and left. The starry sky regained its calm. In front of the 5th dimension's barrier, a woman also turned around and left. This person was Wen Zhaoro. She had always been paying attention to the 5th dimension, the Tao world and the ancient temple. She was very shocked. First, she did not expect the ancient temple to be so strong that they could easily send out so many self-release experts. Second, she did not expect that Zhou Xian could actually block the alliance of the Tao world and the 5th dimension. Zhou Xian was very strong and the 5th dimension was not as weak as she thought. The ancient temple was even stronger than she expected. The current 6th dimension also needed to change. At least it needed to become more united. On this day when Zhaoro's heart was heavy, because she felt pressure. The old monk brought a monk back to the foot of the sacred mountain. This time the ancient temple could be said to have suffered heavy losses. They lost 3 super experts, 2 of whom were at the upper self-release realm. Did they underestimate Zhou Xian? No. This time they really did not underestimate Zhou Xian. The ancient temple sent so many experts down at once and they even joined forces with the Tao world. In terms of lineup, it could be said that they completely crushed the 5th dimension. Moreover, he used the Buddhist commandment blade. However, they were defeated. Miserably. At this time, a white-robed monk suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. Seeing this white-robed monk, the two of them hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Governor Elder." The governor elder said softly, "Didn't that Miss Mu make a move?" The old monk shook his head. "Not yet." The governor elder said softly, "Then it seems that we have underestimated this young benefactor Zhou Xian." The old monk looked at the governor elder. "Governor Elder, this Zhou Xian's bloodline is extremely strange. Even the Buddhist commandment blade can't do anything to it." The governor elder said, "There is only one explanation. This bloodline ancestor's cultivation is above the previous elders. Their dharma cultivation is inferior to the bloodline origin. Of course, this is also because this Zhou Xian's bloodline awakened to a deep enough degree that the Buddhist commandment blade can't purify it." The old monk frowned slightly. "This ancestor Zhou Xian?" The governor elder's right hand gently turned the prayer beads in his hand. "It seems that we still know too little about this young master Yi. The karma of his body is far from being a prophet. Both of you rest well. I will personally go and understand." The old monk was a little surprised. "Governor Elder, are you going down the mountain?" The governor elder said with a smile. "After cultivating for so many years, I also want to go out and see the scenery. Reading 10,000 books is not as good as walking 10,000 miles. Just take it as a stroll and relax." The old monk and the other monk put their palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. The governor elder smiled and walked down the mountain. After a while he disappeared at the foot of the mountain. After a long silence, the old monk and the other monk also disappeared at the end of the Shaodao. In fact, the ancient temple had a rule. It did not care about the matters at the foot of the mountain. Therefore, the people of the world knew very little about the ancient temple. However, this time the ancient temple had to care because the Tao scripture and Buddhist scripture were very important to the ancient temple. Tao world. On the way back to the Tao world, Li Mian and Mo Dao's expressions were extremely grave. They did not expect that they would lose this time after joining hands with the Tao world. Moreover, the 5th dimension Tendo did not make a move from the beginning to the end. At this time Mo Dao suddenly said, "We have to find out the power of Zhou Xian's bloodline and that Xiao Ta." Li Mian nodded. Zhou Xian's greatest threat to them was the power of bloodline and that Xiao Ta. These two were really too great a threat to them. That Xiao Ta directly killed 2 self-released tier elites and that power of bloodline. After Zhou Xian activated the power of bloodline, it was like he had changed into a different person. He could completely face an upper-level self-released tier elite head-on. Moreover, this upper-level self-released tier elite was holding a super divine tool. This was practically like cheating. Too freakish. Mo Dao sighed in a low voice. This person must not be left alive. Otherwise, our Dao world will be in danger in the future. Li Mian nodded, deeply agreeing. What cultivation level was Yi Xian now? Just the shattering void tier. If Yi Xian reached the self-release tier with his terrifying power of bloodline and a pile of terrifying divine equipment, who in the Dao world could stop him? This kind of person could really threaten the Dao world. Li Mian suddenly said, no matter what, we have to make the Pope pay attention to Yi Xian this time. We can't treat Yi Xian with any contempt or carelessness. Otherwise, our Dao world will pay a terrible price in the future. Mo Dao nodded. This time the Dao world's losses were smaller than the ancient temples, but next time might not be the same. Especially a monster like Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was given more time, the consequences would be simply unimaginable. Now the two of them were most worried that the Pope and the others still did not know how terrifying Yi Xian was. It wasn't just Yi Xian, the overall strength of the fifth dimension was not as weak as the Dao world thought. There were a few people in the fifth dimension that could actually fight a self-release tier elite. This was extremely terrifying. Soon Mo Dao and the others quickened their pace. Qian Mo brought Yi Xian to the ice mountain where they had first met. She turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's entire body was blood red, and his body emitted an extremely powerful hostility and killing intent. Yi Xian's eyes were like a sea of blood, extremely frightening. Qian Mo waved her right hand, and the World Prison Pagoda in Yi Xian's body appeared in her hand. She covered the World Prison Pagoda with her right hand and sealed it. Then she looked at Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian's power of bloodline was completely stimulated. If they dual cultivated at this time, she would obtain great benefits. Qian Mo looked at Yi Xian for a long time. After a long time she said, doing it once or 10 times is the same. What's the difference? After saying that, she waved her right hand and Yi Xian's clothes instantly turned to ashes. Yi Xian was about to make a move, but the sword in his hand trembled. The sword spirit couldn't make him sober, but she could affect Yi Xian because she had the same attribute as Yi Xian. Of course, there was another more important reason, and that was that she wasn't affected by Yi Xian. If it was the executing heaven sword, it wouldn't work. Once the executing heaven sword turned red, it would be the same as Yi Xian without any intelligence. Moreover, the executing heaven sword wouldn't resist Yi Xian. However, the sword spirit was different. Yi Xian's baleful aura and hostility weren't able to affect her. At this time, Qian Mo suddenly pulled the silk belt on her waist. With this pull, her clothes fell off and the two of them looked at each other. Qian Mo looked at Yi Xian. She walked in front of Yi Xian and began. Chapter 1232. Dual Cultivation. This time Qian Mo was not as casual as before because she was clear-headed. She needed to borrow Yi Xian's bloodline power to break through, not to enjoy it. When the two of them interacted, Qian Mo's aura suddenly soared. If she had guessed correctly, the current Yi Xian was most suitable for dual cultivation because Yi Xian's bloodline had been completely activated. This was also beneficial to Yi Xian. This was because the killing intent and hostility on Yi Xian's body was gradually decreasing. Although they were in an ice mountain, the two of them were like two balls of fire. Qian Mo looked at Yi Xian below her. She looked at Yi Xian with calm eyes. Feelings? She naturally did not have any feelings for Yi Xian. Her and Yi Xian becoming like this could be said to be an ill-fated relationship. No, the first time could be said to be ill-fated, but this time, Qian Mo felt complicated. Deal. Strictly speaking, she and Yi Xian were making a deal, but she did not want to admit that it was a deal. After a long time, Qian Mo shook her head. Whether it was against her heart or a deal, since she had already chosen to do this, she might as well go crazy. Soon, panting sounds could be heard from the ice mountain. About 4 hours later, a powerful force suddenly rushed into the sky from the ice mountain. At this moment, Qian Mo had already put on her clothes. Powerful auras continuously spread out from her body and the surrounding ice mountain started to melt. Bloodline breakthrough. After borrowing Yi Xian's bloodline power, her mortal bloodline had broken through its shackles. Now she was no longer restricted by her bloodline. Not only that, she had also used this bloodline breakthrough to reach the upper self-release realm. She was a top expert of this world. Qian Mo closed her eyes and clenched her fists. At this moment her body was filled with endless power. Upper self-release realm. If she met that old monk now, she would not fear him at all. Ordinary self-release realm experts would not be her match. Fifth dimension Tendo. At this moment she thought of the fifth dimension Tendo. However, when she thought of that woman, a sense of helplessness rose from the depths of her heart. Even if she reached the upper realm of self-release, she still did not have the confidence to challenge Mu Yanyan. That woman was so powerful that it made people despair. Qianemo looked into the distance. In the distant ice mountain there were countless ice people. Most of them were her clansmen. They were all killed by Mu Yanyan. Back then she had brought her clansmen to this universe. Her thoughts at that time were very simple. She wanted to destroy Tendo and make her clan the ruler of this universe. Unfortunately, she had underestimated the strength of the fifth dimension Tendo. Too many experts from her family had died in that battle. After a long time, Qianemo shook her head. She did not want to think about revenge. That woman didn't kill her even after she reached the self-release realm. There was only one explanation: she wasn't afraid of her. Qianemo opened her palm and the world prison pagoda appeared in her hand. She had witnessed Xiao Ta's might in the previous battle. According to her guess, the Tao scripture was very likely in Xiao Ta's body. However, she did not have any other thoughts. She turned to look at the nearby Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Xian had already returned to normal, but he was still not awake. Qianemo pointed with her finger and the world prison pagoda flew towards Yi Xian. Forcefully seized the world prison pagoda? She had never had such thoughts because she knew that even if the Tao scripture fell into her hands, she would not be able to keep it. It could be said that once she seized this Tao scripture, her enemies would not only be the Tao world and the ancient temple, but also Yi Xian's side. This Tao scripture was very tempting, but ordinary people would die if they obtained it. Qianemo walked in front of Yi Xian and squatted down looking at Yi Xian. In fact, if she wanted to sever her ill-fated relationship with Yi Xian, it was very simple. She would just have to kill Yi Xian. He had this thought before. Qianemo looked at Yi Xian for a long time before turning to leave. Regardless of whether it was an ill-fated relationship or not, she did not want to care so much. Right now she had more important things to do. In a short while Qianemo left the fifth dimension. Inside the ice mountain. About an hour later Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. Yi Xian hurriedly sat up and looked around. Ice mountain. At this moment the sword beside him suddenly trembled. Yi Xian knew everything. After a long silence Yi Xian said softly, "Did she leave?" After saying that he looked up at the depths of the starry sky. Qianemo should have returned to the Tao world. After a moment of silence Yi Xian looked at himself. At this moment his bloodline power had returned to normal. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly took out a mirror. In the mirror he looked at his hair and saw some white strands. When he saw this, Yi Xian's face sank. "Big sister, how many years of lifespan do I have left?" Big sister said, 10 years. If you activate the prison pagoda again you will die on the spot. 10 years of lifespan. Yi Xian was stunned. He played with the pagoda for a bit and almost played himself to death. Big sister suddenly said, "You must break through to the origin breaker realm as soon as possible. If you break through, your lifespan will increase. Only then will you be able to continue using the prison pagoda." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Big sister, this pagoda has already recognized me as its master, and all of you cooperated with me. Why is there such a huge backlash?" Big sister fell silent for a moment before she said, "I did not expect there to be such a huge backlash. It should be because of the gathering of Tao laws. After the gathering of Tao laws, the power of Tao laws produced isn't something you can endure right now. The power of Tao laws. Needless to say, these Tao laws were really strong." Big sister did not lie to him. With the gathering of Tao laws, he was invincible in the fifth dimension. Of course, he had to get rid of that Mu Yanyan. Not to mention, even with the prison pagoda, he wasn't confident in being able to trap that Mu Yanyan. Perhaps even the prophet himself at his peak with this pagoda wouldn't be able to. Big sister suddenly said, "What do you intend to do with those 2 monks in the pagoda?" Yi Xian immediately returned to the pagoda. He went to the first floor. On the first floor those 2 monks were still imprisoned by Xiao Ta. With a single thought from him, those 2 monks would immediately die because their cultivations had been sealed by the prison pagoda. Yi Xian walked over to those 2 monks and sized them up. The 2 of them sat cross-legged on the ground with their palms pressed together and were silently chanting. Yi Xian looked at them for a long time before shaking his head and turning to leave. He didn't say anything, because he knew that he couldn't subdue those two. These people weren't even afraid of death. However, he didn't kill them. They would definitely be useful in the future. These were two upper self-release realm experts. The ancient temple wouldn't ignore them. After Yi Xian left the prison pagoda, he looked at the sword in his hand. The sword's spirit. Besides the power of his bloodline, there was another reason he could fight that old monk, and that was the sword's spirit. The sword's spirit was a perfect match for his bloodline. It was even better than the executing heaven sword. Unfortunately, the sword's spirit didn't communicate with him. Without thinking too much about it, Yi Xian put the sword's spirit away and vanished. Right now he still had a lot of things to do. The Tao world. Because of the disappearance of the Tao spirit, the spirit energy in various parts of the Tao world had dried up. However, the people of the Tao world didn't care about this problem. They only had eyes for the Tao scripture. The precious Tao scripture that had once descended into the Tao world. Just one page was enough to change one's destiny. The God Palace. Mo Dao and the others were standing in front of the Pope. The Immortal Pavilion's master, Jiang Yu, was there as well. The hall was very quiet. The Pope and Jiang Yu hadn't expected that they would fail this time. Moreover, they had failed while working together with the ancient temple. Meanwhile, Jiang Yu suddenly said, "It looks like things aren't as simple as we thought." The Pope was expressionless. "I just don't know if the Tao scripture is in Yi Xian's hands." Li Mian said solemnly, "Pope, I think that even if the Tao scripture isn't in Yi Xian's hands, we still can't let him live. He's related to Yi Qingji, and coupled with his terrifying talent, I'm afraid no one in the Tao world will be able to keep him in check in time." Jiang Yu nodded. "Indeed. Although the Tao scripture is important, we have to be on guard against this person. He has such combat strength at such a young age. If he reaches self-release, then not to mention others, even you and I won't be able to do anything to him. Moreover, even if he doesn't have the Tao scripture, he should have read it. Since that's the case, why don't we just target him?" The Pope fell silent. Jiang Yu continued, "Even if Di Linyuan obtains the Tao scripture, it's impossible for him to break through in a short period of time. So long as we obtain the Tao scripture from Yi Xian, then we'll have a very good chance of breaking through before Di Linyuan." Li Mian nodded. Pavilion Master Zhang is right. Killing Yi Xian won't just allow us to obtain the Tao scripture, we'll be able to eliminate a calamity. As for Di Linyuan, even if he obtains the Tao scripture, he'll definitely be heavily injured and won't be able to break through in a short period of time. Meanwhile, Mo Dao suddenly said, "What if the woman in a plain dress is still alive?" The woman in a plain dress. Everyone here fell silent when they heard this. All of them felt that Di Linyuan was still alive. Because they felt that the woman in a plain dress had definitely been heavily injured while fighting a sixth self-release realm expert. However, they'd overlooked something, and it was that the woman in a plain dress had killed 6 self-release realm experts. So it was very likely that the woman in a plain dress was still alive. Jiang Yu suddenly said, "If she's still alive and has a close relationship with Yi Xian, then she'll definitely appear as well if we act against Yi Xian. We'll be able to kill 3 birds with 1 stone." As he spoke, he gazed at the cult master. The cult master fell silent for a moment before he said, "Brother Jiang is right. Then let's deal with Yi Xian with all our strength. Brother Jiang, join forces with those self-release realm experts of the Tao world. I'll personally head to the Tao world and contact the ancient temple. Let's see what their attitude is." Jiang Yu nodded. "Alright." As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. The cult master turned around and vanished as well. Li Mian and Jiang Yu exchanged glances, and then Li Mian spoke solemnly, "I hope we'll be able to kill Yi Xian this time." Mo Dao nodded. Since the sect master and pavilion master have taken him seriously, then Yi Xian will definitely die. The cult master and Jiang Yu's intentions were very clear. They intended to gather the strength of the entire Tao world and the ancient temple to deal with Yi Xian. P.S. Asking for votes. I haven't asked for votes in a very long time. Chapter 1233. In the 5th dimension. After Yi Xian returned to the Wu clan, he immediately went into seclusion. His gains from the previous battle were not small. Especially the battle with the old monk. The old monk was at the upper self-release realm. Being able to fight with such an expert was an opportunity for him. An opportunity to break through. While Yi Xian was in seclusion, Guan Yin came to the sword sect. At this time, the sword sect had 126 people. Among them, the weakest was at the origin returning realm. The sword sect also had 8 people at the half-step self-release realm. Although it was few, the battle strength of these 8 people could definitely reach the self-release realm. Because the previous battle made Guan Yin realize that ordinary self-release realm experts were not that scary. Some of the top monsters in the 5th dimension could fight against self-release realm experts. And the swordsmen of the sword sect were all monsters. Guan Yin found Senior Sister Lu and the two of them strolled in a xiaodao in the forest. Senior Sister Lu said, "The next time they come they should be stronger and have more people." Guan Yin nodded, "Yes." Senior Sister Lu looked at Guan Yin, "When can we go out to battle?" Guan Yin was silent for a moment, then said, "The 6th dimension and the Dao world know very little about the sword sect. This is our chance. The sword sect doesn't make a move, but once they do we will decide the outcome." Senior Sister Lu said softly, "Yes." Guan Yin said, "If the sword sect needs anything you can tell me." Senior Sister Lu said, "I want Lady Audiobook to come to the sword sect." "Audiobook?" Guan Yin nodded, "I will talk to Lady Audiobook." In terms of sword Dao attainments, Audiobook was undoubtedly the highest in the 5th dimension. If Audiobook came to the sword sect to give pointers, it would definitely be of great benefit to the swordsmen of the sword sect. Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, "We are very passive now because we know very little about the ancient temple and the Dao world." Guan Yin nodded. "I know." Senior Sister Lu said, "Is there a way to solve it?" Guan Yin shook his head. "Even the Union Hall doesn't know much about the ancient temple. As for the Dao world, we have no way of contacting it." At this point she frowned. "Something's wrong." Senior Sister Lu said, "Xiao Dao." Guan Yin turned around and left. She had to contact Xiao Dao. After a moment of silence, Senior Sister Lu walked into the distance. Before long she arrived in front of a statue. It was the statue of the founder of the sword sect. Looking at the statue of the green-robed man, Senior Sister Lu said softly, "After so many years, there's actually no news of you. You're too cruel." A moment later, Senior Sister Lu turned around and left. The Dao world, a demonic path family clan. In a room, Xiao Dao rolled up a letter and handed it to Mo Zhong in front of him. "Go to 5th dimension and give this to Yi Xian." The Mo Zhong put the letter away and said, "This is." Xiao Dao said softly, "They know too little about the Dao world. This is the information I've collected about the Dao world. With this information they will have a rough idea of the Dao world's strength." Mo Zhong nodded, "Understood." With that he turned and left. In the room, Xiao Dao kept quiet for a long time before he said softly, "Don't die. Or else, who am I going to return this favor to?" The monarch race. Di Ming was now the clan master of the monarch race. As for Di Linyuan, the monarch race could only treat him as dead. Di Ming sitting in the palace, in front of him was a self-release expert from the monarch race, Di Lian. He was the one sent by Di Ming to 5th dimension to observe Yi Xian. After a long time of silence, Di Ming said softly, "5th dimension 1." One had to admit that Di Ming was shocked. The Dao world sent down 6 self-release realm experts. Moreover, the ancient temple also sent out so many self-release realm experts, but they were defeated. Yi Xian had killed 2 upper self-release realm powerhouses by himself. Though he did it with the help of external forces, it was still terrifying. Most importantly, in the 5th dimension, Yi Xian wasn't the only one who could fight self-release experts alone. There were many others who could. There were so many monsters in the 5th dimension. At this moment, Di Lian suddenly said, "The overall strength of the 5th dimension is not as weak as we thought. Of course, the ancient temple's strength is also beyond our expectations." Ancient temple. Di Ming nodded. This ancient temple was able to send 3 upper-level self-release experts. This strength was no weaker than the Dao world's top forces. Di Ming suddenly asked, "What is the attitude of the 6th dimension?" Di Lian said solemnly, "The 6th dimension is helping Yi Xian. But when the Dao world and ancient temple joined hands against the 5th dimension, the 6th dimension did not send anyone to help." Di Ming nodded, "I understand. The 6th dimension is providing Yi Xian with soft help. Seems like the 6th dimension's Union Palace has discovered something. That's why they are helping Yi Xian. Lian said, yes, in terms of strength, the fifth dimension has no advantage, but the sixth dimension's Union Palace still chose to help. The reason is simple, they believe in Yi Xian. Lian looked at Ming, Clan Master, the Pope, Celestial Pavilion and Ancient Temple will not let this go easily. If we help Yi Xian, we will definitely offend them. But now, it's not a good time for us to be dragged into this mess. Ming shook. No, I'm the opposite of what you think. I think this might be an opportunity for us. Lian frowned. Opportunity? Ming nodded. Have you ever thought about what will happen to us if the Pope and Jiangyu really get the scripture? By then, a single word from them will make us kneel before them. We won't even have a chance to resist. Lian remained silent. For now, the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion wouldn't dare to annihilate the monarch races because they still had the ability to resist. If they were to do so, even if the monarch races were annihilated, they would still be able to take a bite out of them. However, if the Pope and Jiangyu obtained the scripture, once they broke through, the monarch races would have no choice but to submit to them. Lian said, the risk is too great. Ming nodded, too great. If the monarch races were to help Yi Xian, they might face the wrath of the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion. But now, because of the scripture, many factions in the Tao world had gathered around these two factions. Though they weren't as strong as the monarch races, they were still a force to be reckoned with. In other words, the monarch races were no match for the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion. Ming was silent for a moment. He said, we can help them in the dark. Lian frowned. Help them in the dark? Ming said softly, give them money, cultivation resources and divine items. As he spoke, he looked at Lian. Get ready, take out some of the divine items and cultivation resources from the treasury, then have someone who isn't from the monarch races send them to the fifth dimension. Lian asked, family, is this worth it? Ming nodded. If we can befriend Yi Xian, it will be worth it. If Yi Xian fails, we will only lose some worldly possessions. So it's worth it. Lian hesitated. If the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion find out, Ming sneered coldly. Do you think that if we don't help Yi Xian, the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion will let us go? They won't. We and the demonic clans are just meat in their eyes. Once they are free, they will devour us. Because of the scripture, they have gathered some factions around them. Hence we are no match for them. Lian nodded. Understood. As he finished, he left silently. Moments later, Lian left with some of the monarch race's wealth and cultivation resources. In front of the palace, Ming slowly closed his eyes. There was another reason why he chose Yi Xian. Compared to the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion, he hoped that Yi Xian could seize the opportunity to rise. That way Yi Xian would break the balance of power in the Tao world. That way the Tao world would be balanced and the monarch races would have a chance. Of course, there was another reason. According to the investigation, Yi Xian was a loyal swordsman. A person like him was more trustworthy than the Bloodshed God Palace and Celestial Pavilion. What Ming didn't notice was that not far away from him, just a few feet away from him, was a lady standing there. It was the fifth dimension Tendo Moon Yanyan. Moon Yanyan remained silent for a long time before she turned and left. She left just like that, but the monarch didn't notice her at all. It was strange. As Moon Yanyan walked out of the palace, her lips curved into a smile. At this moment she suddenly thought of a human saying, a just cause enjoys abundant support, an unjust cause finds little. Though Yi Xian wasn't as cruel and ruthless as the other monarchs, it was because of his benevolence that he gained the recognition and help of many. Many times, benevolence and justice were still very useful. Because no one would want to be friends with a monarch. At this moment Moon Yanyan stopped abruptly. She placed her right hand on her chest and frowned. A voice sounded beside her. What's wrong? Moon Yanyan shook her head and continued walking. The voice said, is there something wrong with your body? No. Moon Yanyan smiled. You still want to lie to me? The voice said in a deep voice. Moon Yanyan giggled. Don't worry, I'm really fine. The voice said, you're lying. Let's not talk about this. Moon Yanyan shrugged. I still have some matters to deal with. Otherwise that little guy will have a hard time living. The voice said angrily, why did you interfere with his matters? Is it because you interfered with his matters that your body has problems? After a moment of silence, Moon Yanyan shook her head. There's something wrong with my body in the first place. However, I've underestimated his karma. I can resist the prophet, but some karma, it's a bit like the cause of disaster. As she said that, she looked up into the depths of the starry sky and frowned. Who was it that used such a vicious karma technique on him? The other party's attainments in karma are countless times better than the prophet's. The voice said, then don't interfere with his matters. It's too late. Moon Yanyan smiled. The voice was a bit anxious. Is it too late to give up now? It's indeed too late. Moon Yanyan said softly. As she said that, she lowered her head and looked down. I suddenly feel a bit sorry for him. Although he has the plain-dressed woman to protect him, this road isn't easy to walk on. As she said that, she walked into the distance. And around her, some red threads invisible to the naked eye appeared. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.